One night between alleys, a strange guy was running as hard as he could and turning back was angry about getting into trouble. He stopped for a breather and thought he had managed to get away from the villains. But suddenly he felt a knife at his throat. The guy decides to act differently and tells the villain that if he wants money, he will give him everything he has, and asks in return only for mercy. But the villain was not the type to take money for his assignment, and telling the guy to die cut his throat. The next morning, all the people scattered to go about their business and the little fellows went to school. But one boy named Kai, who was in high school, started yawning along the way and saying he was sleepy. But Kai is also an assassin, and when he thought about it, he said it was a stupid decision to go to school. And right after his night job, when he arrived in his class, he lived the same ordinary days. But he was still very bored among his peers. But he had a student named Mito Shuji in his class, and he was the main trump card of the soccer club, and the one who was also the class president. After Mito Shuji entered the classroom like that, everyone was already displeased and said that he had come again. But Mito was always a friendly guy, and after walking into the classroom and wishing everyone a good morning, the student number 22 Nagase Rina, who is the unspoken leader of the girls of the class, looked at the headman and said that he was, as always, insufferable. Rina asked the guy why he was still messing around with him. Moto replied that the guy was their classmate after all, and of course, as always, he's asleep, and he has no sense of tact. But suddenly the door opens and in walks an angry-looking guy. Rina immediately looked at him and said, here came a worse version. It was student number 1 named Arashir Shunsuke, and he was known in the neighborhood as the head of the bullies. But even so, there were his friends in the class who were even considered servants. They approached Arashi-san and greeted him, but RC saw that Kai was sleeping at the last desk and decided to go over and wake him up. But he didn't succeed at first. Kai still continued to sleep and didn't even hear the people next to him yelling at him. But Arashir couldn't stand it and said that he was addressing him, and if he continued to sleep, he would be in trouble. Arashir saw that the guy wasn't paying attention to him and decided to wake him up with his hand. But suddenly Kai grabbed his hand and squeezed it. Arashir was in shock and didn't understand how this happened. Kai opened his eyes and asked what he wanted and why he wouldn't let him sleep. Arashir got angry and yelled at him to let go of his hand. Kai suddenly felt hungry and saw the world differently with his eyes. But letting go of his hand, he apologized and said he hadn't noticed himself. Arashir immediately pulled his hand away and looked at him with anger. Arashir told the guy that he was just a creepy jerk. Suddenly, student number 8 Kenzaki Rin asked them if they could keep it down a bit. Rin was the top beauty of the class, especially talented in literature and martial arts, and keeps herself aloof from the rest of the class. Arashir turned around and asked her, was she being impertinent to him too? But the number 29 student named Hashimoto Mirai stood up for Rin. Mirai told him he'd better stop before he violated anything. She was a member of the disciplinary committee, a strict girl who respected order in everything. But suddenly a student number 23 named Narumi Raya entered the conversation and told them to finish already. And still she would only be ignored. This student always gave the image of a frivolous guy. But Mirai turned around and told him to be quiet and not to stick his nose where it didn't belong. And Kai didn't even pay attention to them and still continued to rest and enjoy with his sleep. But Arashir hearing his temple made him even more angry. After much socializing, the students all went to their seats but were still angry at each other and hated each other. All of these students attended Kagura High School and were in the first grade, second year. In this class, such conflict scenes are a daily routine. But suddenly Kai opened his eyes and felt a strange feeling. He began to feel and see that Muto had something under his feet at the moment. Suddenly after those words, the portal activated and a huge seal formed above them. All the students were shocked and asked, what is this? And what is even happening in the classroom? Muto didn't understand either. What was it? But pulling himself together, he told the others that they would think later. He told them to leave the classroom, but Kai immediately realized that they would definitely not make it out in time. Immediately the portal activated and the students saw only a bright white light in front of them. The portal decided to take them to another dimension. Kai was the most resilient of them all and didn't pass out after the fall. Getting to his feet, he looked around and thought, what is this place? But he saw some tasks made of stone and huge columns as fortifications. But at the moment he had only one explanation. As hard as it was to believe, they had been swallowed up by that white light, and then the whole class moved somewhere. After these words, the students came to their senses and Rhea asked where they had gone. Rina was shocked too and asked what was that white light? But Mito decided to take matters into his own hands and told them to calm down. And at this point, he didn't know what had happened to them either, but he'd want to make sure no one was hurt first. Kai listened and saw that Mito had made a good move. But he was able to calm even those who were one step away from panic. But Arashir was his usual self and said there was nothing to waste time with. And if he was not going to deal with the situation, there was nothing to talk about. And he immediately ordered his servants to go with him. But Kai decided to stop him and told him to take his time. Arashir asked the boy what he wanted. Kai answered him that footsteps could be heard outside the door, and someone was coming towards them. Arashir was surprised and asked who else could be coming. But Kai immediately sensed that it was a man and a woman. And the only question was, what did they want from them? Suddenly, the door opened and two people unknown to them appeared in front of the students. The girl immediately decided to go through with the jokes and said that this was what she expected from the hero candidates. They managed to keep their composure. The students were all shocked and said she was very beautiful. But what kind of cosplay is she wearing? To them it reminds them of a knight and princess from medieval times. Kai at this time hid behind a rock and analyzed that the guy with the sword was well built. There's also this wary atmosphere around him. And he's strong, and it's clearly not cosplay. As for the girl, she's had some training, but nothing remarkable. The girl said he was glad to meet them. And her name is Leonora, and she is the archbishop of the sacred country of Dig Rest, and by his side is her knight Gaius. Arashir asked immediately, what kind of nonsense is she talking about? He had never heard of such a country in his life. Leonora replied that it wasn't nonsense, but she could understand his point of view. But then Mito entered the conversation and said that he apologized. They have no idea how they got here, so they're a little confused. And could Leonora tell them what's going on? Leonora replied that of course. That's what she was here for. And the simplest way to describe their situation is this. At this point, they have been summoned to another world, or they are the hope of humanity that is able to overthrow the Demon King. And they are candidates for heroes. Mito told them that, frankly, her story was hard to believe. Arashir also revealed that all she does is babble on about some incomprehensible nonsense. Gaius, hearing such words, told him to choose his expressions, for before him was the saint of their country. Arashir told him to shut his mouth. And if he shows off, he'll kill him. Gaius got angry and replied to the guy that apparently he would only understand his place after he knew pain. But Leonora would not let him do it and told him to stop. But Guy replied that he wouldn't. And even if Guy didn't understand much yet, it would be better if they harassed him now. Arashir believed himself and ran at Gaia with his fist, saying he was about to die from such a blow. Kai saw the boy challenge the man with the sword. And he's got a lot of courage, it's really proven. And Arashir is used to fighting against guys with guns. And the main thing is to dodge the first blow and hit from below. Gaius decided to teach him a lesson when he saw that he went to fight with his bare hands because he would actually be more comfortable. Pulling out his sword, he made a sharp movement in front of the guy's head. Arashir was already wounded and didn't even notice the sword movement. Guy told him that he'd only messed up his skin now. And was the brat ready to continue this gig any further? Leonora asked, isn't that enough? Let him put the sword away. She turned to the students and said that she apologized for such a rude welcome, and they never meant them any harm. And the reason they were in this world, she would explain to them now, right down to the smallest detail. And first, she asks them to be quiet. Leonora began to say that in this world, humanity is currently experiencing a Demon King invasion and is on the verge of extinction. Their sacred country of Dig Rest also continues to resist, but they are unable to fully confront the invaders. Kai kept hearing and wondering which Demon King she was talking about and realized it was a standard story. And for the rest of humanity, they, the hero candidates, are the last hope. Mito asked, in other words, they must defeat the Demon King? Ria didn't believe her words either and said it was impossible. Mirai supported her and also said that it was right, they had never been at war, and not every one of them is able to simply endure this situation. One of the students was already crying and asking them to bring her back to their world. Gaius said that no matter how impossible it was, they would have to do it. And besides, the only way they could get home was to defeat the Demon King. The students were all in shock after his words and didn't understand what they should do next and how to return home without war. Kai at this point didn't know if it was a lie or not, but it looked like he was trying to prepare them for the worst. Although even if they accept this situation, people who have lived carefree days will not suddenly be ready to kill, and it takes experience and especially talent. Arashir got angry and said that they called them here to save their asses and they don't care about their opinion. And they think anyone here is going to listen to them? Guy looked at Guy and saw his strange face. But he asked him, what was he staring at? After all, he was already pissing him off. Gaius saw that this guy had not lost his fighting spirit, a promising fighter. He could be a serious threat in the future, and he was thinking of getting rid of him right away. But Leonora decided to heal him a little after his man had wounded him. The Arashir were shocked that his wound had healed. Leonora told the boy that they were guilty before him and she apologizes for all their sins. Suddenly, Rina asked, what's going on? And what is that light? Leonora replied that it was the power of sorcery, and she used the miraculous power granted to her by the god Digrest. She temporarily brings a new law into the world, and they are more familiar with it as magic, she supposes. Kai was shocked that they were familiar with their culture, and this wasn't their first call, he realizes. After that, Leonora approached Mito and said that this power was the main reason they were here. Suddenly, she used her powers on him too and transferred her strength to him. Mito was shocked and felt something indescribable. Rina saw a bright light and told the guy that his hands were sparkling. And Mito felt the light in his hand become a sword. Leonora replied that her miraculous power could awaken the power of blessing in hero candidates, and the power is given randomly and she can't change it. She realizes how self-serving her request to them is, and yet she asks them to lend them her powers. But Mito, holding her sword, said that it was impossible how much strength they would give them. It wouldn't make them better fighters. Leonora replied that she understands that they will have to go through training. And of course, their country promises that it will take all the care of them. Mito said he understood everything. So he decided to turn to the guys and told them all to listen. And now for their own survival, they need protection and knowledge above all else. In an emergency, a blessing could save them, so why not heed them? The students had already started to obey their headman and agree to his terms. Rin also said that she agreed. Leonora replied that she thanked them. Then may they let her give them God's blessing. Miri suddenly saw a bright light in front of her and received the blessing of telekinesis. Erasure felt a tremendous power in his hands, and now he gets the blessing of the explosion. The rest of the students were not without ability either and saw their blessings. Leonora looked and asked if everyone had received their gift. Then Kai came out of the crowd and answered that there was still one left. Leonora walked up to him and apologized, saying she hadn't noticed him, and handed him his powers. Kai felt her touch and was shocked and didn't know what was happening, or what had happened to his vision. Opening his eye, Kai saw Leonora's characterization. He started to say that there was something wrong with his vision. Leonora replied to him that from the looks of it, he had the blessing of an appraisal, and that is a great rarity. Kai was surprised and asked, "Score?" Leonora replied that it seemed to be used to find out details about the strength and skills of the chosen target. Kai decided to look and use his eye. Looking at his hand, he saw his characteristic. Kai realized that it's all displayed in this window, and it looks like a game window. Pretty simple to understand. But suddenly Kai sensed danger, and using his gaze, he saw Erasure attacking him. But he had time to step aside. Looking at his hands, Erasure asked him, what would he say? After all, he has the power of an explosion. But he also wondered what Kai got, so he decided to ask him? Or could he make his eyes red? Rina watched the whole thing from the sidelines and said that he always acts so arrogant. It's even nice to see him get crapped on. Kai was quiet and thought, why did they get so cocky? And from the information he had gotten, he couldn't say for sure how useful their blessings were. And these are blessings lent to them, and no one knows when they'll decide to take them back. And yet there are many ways to kill someone. Leonora looked and said that now everyone had received their blessings. And she realized that it was hard for them to control them yet, but one day their gifts would become fangs that would pierce the Demon King. And now they must be tired. And let them have a good rest today. By evening, each of the students who had become hero candidates were taken and assigned to a different room. Kai thought about gathering more information before going to bed. Then he could act according to the situation, but always be ready. There were guards in the kingdom at night going around the territories. One of them said it was nighttime, but why were they sent out on patrol? The second guard replied that the hero candidates were called up today, so there was nothing to be done. The first guard asked, can they even defend themselves? The second guard replied that he had seen a glimpse of them, just children. And he doubted that they even knew how to hold a sword. I can't even believe they can defeat the Demon King. And it's crazy. But the other guard said it's the saint's work. She must have a plan. Kai had been behind the tree the whole time and saw that this was the third patrol. And it was clear from their words that the guards had been reinforced. Kai decided to use his eye on them, and upon opening the characteristic saw that he only had the swordsmanship skill. Now if he had miraculous powers, he might get caught. But not everyone seems to have it. And as he left, he roughly understood the geography around the castle. It's a typical fortress town. But the castle was guarded not only from the inside, but also from the outside. Kai looked up and wondered what it was like inside the castle, but how difficult it would be to get in while they have heavy security. But he shouldn't be in a hurry, and he could call it a day. Suddenly, he saw his classmates who were not far away from him. Rina said this is a great place, but Miri didn't want that and wondered if they wouldn't. What if they would make them angry? The girl asked, is she afraid? They're just practicing the blessing, that's all. Rina immediately said that if anything, they'd blame it on Hashimoto. She wouldn't be able to sleep anyway, but at least it would be good for her. That's when the girls started to use their powers and get a little practice and understanding of how to use them. Kai saw that it was a blessing from God. And all this makes him uneasy, and it is better to observe them. But suddenly he sensed something, and immediately turned around to be on the alert. Mirai saw it too and looked into the bushes and asked what was that strange sound. Rina also said she heard something too. But what could it be? Suddenly, with slow steps, a huge head that looked like a lizard appeared from the bushes. The girls were frightened and asked what else was it. Kai looked and realized that he had never seen such a beast before, and it looked like a lizard. Kai immediately decided to do an evaluation of the beast. He looked and saw that the beast had gained status by stunning the girls. The lizard didn't immediately attack them, and slowly opening its mouth it began to growl. The girls were frightened by his roar and realized he was going to attack them. They immediately started running away. Kai realized this beast was a brawler, and without a second thought he attacked the humans. And on all fours it moves quickly but linearly, and it doesn't look like it's very smart. But it's a big creature, but if you use a knife you can make it work. Kai threw the knife at it without thinking. The target was so easy that Kai didn't even miss and stabbed it right in the back. The lizard felt the pain and began to roar even louder. Kai immediately hid behind a tree and saw that it worked, but the wound wasn't deep. But the girls didn't even stop to look back and still continued to run away from the beast. But suddenly Rina tripped and fell to the ground. Mirai wanted to pick her up, but the girls stopped her and said they had to run. Rina didn't even feel the beast behind her and just tried to come to her senses. But suddenly she began to feel someone behind her breathing so hard that her hair split through the air. When she saw the face of the beast, she shouted that she did not want to die. But the lizard was not kind and tried to tear her apart. Rina was already ready to say goodbye to her life, that she even covered her eyes with her hands for the last time. She didn't even feel that someone had touched her. She opened her eyes slowly and saw the knife on the lizard's head. She didn't understand how it could have happened or who had done it. The lizard was already dead and motionless. The girls picked her up and said they were there for her. But Rina asked what had happened. The girls told her that they needed to get out of here soon. After all, they didn't want to run into another creature. Kai stood behind the tree wondering if they had left. And there was no particular reason to kill him, but if he just left, he wouldn't be able to sleep properly. And in this world, monsters like that are everywhere. And it doesn't look like he's gonna get much of a walk. Kai approached the monster and pulled his knife out of its body. But suddenly he felt someone following him. Looking in the direction of his senses, he saw and even noticed that there was someone there. And it was time for him to leave too. After he left, a man in a black robe came out from behind the stone and approached the body of the lizard and crushed its head with his foot. The stranger said that the hero candidates are just small-minded. He's even disappointed. But there's one with a similar scent. After that, Guy found the beast in the morning and brought it into the house. The disciples were all surprised and even frightened. Gaius said that this monster was loitering near the walls of the capital last night. Mito's eyes immediately thought of such a beast and became wary, and Mirai immediately saw the monster and let out a tear. Gaius said that the monsters were minions of the Demon King and they like to eat human flesh, and now they're going to be their main target. Gay asked Steady if he had figured anything out. Steady replied that there were signs of sorcery. The work of a mid-level demon, if not higher. Maybe they heard a rumor about the hero candidates and decided to scout the situation. Kai had been listening to his words all this time and was looking behind the wall. Kai thought, what other sorcery? And this is new. It's different from miraculous power. Mirai asked, so this monster was controlled by a demon? Steady replied that the boy had the right idea, and strong demons are capable of controlling monsters. To do so, they use a technique called slave sorcery. First, monsters are mana-mutated plants and animals. They are categorized by ferocity and strength, and only a living organism can become a monster. The main source of their mana is evil. In other words, the Demon King is the very source of their life. And it is logical that he and his minions are able to control the monsters. Guy told him to knock it off, and it was time for them to leave. Steady was displeased and asked, how come? He had so much to learn. Kai realized that about this study, he thought it could be used to gather information. But the real problem now is that this thing was being controlled. And that's when he sensed the demon's presence, and he's quite skilled. It's a miracle he managed to spot him. And he's probably still out there somewhere. The demon was watching Kayam at this moment and thought that he was greatly frightened by his imminent death and was very happy about it. The demon whispered to him not to be afraid. Kai heard his voice and became alert. Arashir suddenly said that they had to defeat the Demon King or they wouldn't be able to go home. And he wasn't going to stay here for long. Rina seconded his words and said that for once he was right. Mito was also supportive and continued that if they wanted to go home, they had no other choice. But Ria was still terrified of yesterday, for they had almost died from that monster. Kai noticed that they were so bold because this world was like a game. But being in a different world didn't change the essence of war, and they'd better realize it soon. Suddenly Leonora came out and said that there was no need to hurry so much. They do not yet realize the full extent of their new powers. They should first go through training. And against all odds, they called them to this world as candidates for heroes. Their speed of progress is vastly different from that of the locals, and so it had been a week since training had started. Kai had spent all this time in the library and studying, but Kai could see that he didn't understand a word. And it was strange that they could talk to each other freely without language barriers. But looking outside, he saw the other students practicing and using their new abilities. Kai was told that grades were not the most suitable blessing for combat. He was forbidden from training, but at least he had access to the library. That day when Leonora was distributing assignments to everyone, she told Caius that knowledge is also power. Kai read the book and said there is only one history of the country, and there's nothing about demons. He was so unhappy with the assignment distribution that he was already tired of sitting in the library for the whole time. But he also realized that Leonora wasn't lying. They were developing not by the day, but by the hour. And among them there are 5 of the best: Narumi, Arashur, Kanzaki, Hashimoto, and Nagase. And then there's one who surpasses them all. At that moment after his words, he saw an unfamiliar sword flying in the air after his battle with Mito. The warrior said he was giving up. And the amazing thing is that the apprentice is already stronger than him. Mito replied to his opponent that it is all thanks to his instruction, and he is truly grateful to him for that. Kai used his eye and looked at Mito's characterization, and he remembered that the guy until a week ago all the stats were around DF. And even if Mito is a genius, it's just an unimaginable leap. And God's blessing doesn't just give the ability, it affects their bodies. A group of students were walking towards him. When they saw Kai, they asked him what he was doing at the training ground if he couldn't fight. Let him go back to sitting and quietly reading his books. Kai realized they were at it again, and the others began to look down on him too. And the result of the growth of their powers. The student told him not to ignore him. They're friends with him after all. But Kai wouldn't talk to him and tripped him, knocking him to the ground. Kai asked the guy what was wrong with him. Did he just fall off in the middle of nowhere? Everyone was shocked by this, and even one of the guys started to get indignant and angry. Arashur told them to leave him alone. He looked around and saw Leonora coming. Leonora and Guy went out to the range and watched their new students train and improve. Leonora said, thanking them for their attention. They have all made remarkable progress. Even they did not expect such progress, and so they decided to accelerate the schedule. Ria asked with surprise, a timetable? Just don't let her say that right now she's going to send them after the Demon King's head. Leonora replied that she wouldn't ask them to do such a thing. And it was time for them to fight a real battle with the monster. The students were shocked and asked in surprise, a fight with a monster? And Kai was happy at that moment because he would show himself in all his glory. When they arrived in the forest, Gaius said that today was their practice day. And as they could see for themselves, it would be in the forest. They can't move in a large group, it will only get in the way, so they will split into teams of 2 to 3 people. Rina was surprised to hear 2 or 3 people each and immediately asked Mito if he wanted to join her team. The guy didn't refuse and immediately agreed. But one of the students was also near them and hearing her words asked if she could join them. 2 guys who were servants told Arashur that they were with him, and their brother would take out any monster they came across. One of the students was a bit disgruntled and looked at Ray and asked why she had gotten him on the team. The boy replied that the 2 of them could do anything. Guy looked at it and said it was great, and decided to ask if everyone had formed teams. But in a moment he saw 2 students and asked what was wrong with them. Rin replied that for some reason no one had invited her to their group. The rest of the guys realized that they didn't want to get into battles due to the fact that they were too scared. Rin said there's nothing to be done and she'll team up with Shinjo. Would the guy be okay with that? Kai answered her to do as she knows how. Kai saw that Kanzaki Rin is confident and cold-blooded. She acts like a proud girl who won't let anyone get in her way. Suddenly Rin saw him looking at her and asked what was wrong. Kai replied that it was nothing and not worth paying attention to. Leonora saw that everyone had gathered and said that the team that defeated the most monsters would receive a special reward from them, and wished them all good luck. Getting to the task, Rin, as a confident girl, walked ahead while Kai was trailing and watching the rear. Suddenly, Rin decided to speak up and said she would tell you right away. Her blessing was better than any of their classmates, so he doesn't even have to do anything. Just a way to stay out of the way. Kai replied that's fine and he's relying on her. Rin made that look after he said that and said that he didn't have any pride. Kai realized that they could start by looking at Kanzaki's combat potential. and there are 4 signals around them at once, and apparently decided to surround them. Rin immediately stopped and said that there was a monster here. At that moment, a goblin with a bat in his hands walked towards her. The goblin couldn't talk or even speak, and with his squeaky screams, he headed off to beat up Rin. But Rin was strong and proud. Unafraid, she used a heavy punch attack and pinned the goblin to the ground. Kai watched from afar and saw that this was Kanzaki's blessing, and it is control, the power to make others do her bidding. Kai told her that there were more monsters around. Rin was not confused and replied that it was very good. Rin immediately ordered the goblin to drop his weapon. The monster, hearing such an order, threw his bat away. Rin then ordered him to put his hands behind his back. Kai looked at her and asked what's wrong. Rin replied that if you use the blessing for too long, it's exhausting. Kai wondered if she was using too much energy. Kai turned around and told her to kill him quickly before the others pulled up. Rin asked with surprise, "Kill? And isn't he similar to humans?" The goblin was merciless after her submission and even cried. Kai asked her, "So what? He's the one who attacked them. Has she forgotten? They're their enemies. It doesn't make sense to let them live." Rin understood his words and said he was right. And she understood him. Kai found a stone along the way and saw that even after getting the power, she remains a simple, confused schoolgirl. And the most important thing was for her to make the right decision when danger came. Immediately, monsters appeared in front of him and surrounded him from different directions. Kai immediately said they were out. Rin heard his words and decided to use submission again and put them on the ground. Kai watched her as she agonized and asked what she was going to do next. Rin was angry and told him to shut up, and he better help instead of standing still. But Kai said that she herself told him to stay out of the way. Rin said she was going to kill them. That's what he wants her to do. Rin decided to get serious and ordered the monsters to snap their necks. The monsters could not resist against her order and, grabbing their necks, killed themselves. Kai was surprised and asked her if she could be forced to do that too. Rin answered that yes. However, the stronger the opponent, the less chance of success. And truth be told, getting involved in real combat and seeing dead bodies wasn't how she envisioned it. Kai explained to her that they had attacked them. In other words, they were the enemy. The enemy must be killed, no matter if it was a monster or a human. Unless, of course, she wants to stay alive. Rin asked him suddenly, why is he so calm? He didn't even have much strength. Kai looked at the monster's body and replied that he wasn't scary. That was one of his strengths. And there's not much to be gained here. The guy asked her what will they do next. If she was afraid, they might as well go back. Rin immediately made herself look like a proud and strong girl and said no, they were moving on. Kai realized that if she was stubborn, but she had a resilient psyche, and he even wondered how the others were doing. At that moment, Rhea was running in the forest because of all his strength and asking what to do with them. The girl answered him not to ask her, but she had heard that the monsters here were weak. Suddenly, they both turned around and said it was all or nothing. The girl said she was with him too. And one of them used wind attack and the other one used stone attack. Using their single attack, they used a rock in battle and the guy sent it straight at the monster due to his wind abilities. But it was more complicated than that because the stone didn't work, and the monster was still intact. Rhea was shocked and even fell to the ground. And the girl watched as the monster approached them and said it wasn't good. Rhea asked, how could they deal with this monster? The monster was actually stronger and more powerful, and its build was like that of a bear. Rin kept promising herself that she would definitely return to her world. And she had been raised by her grandfather since birth, and she still hadn't repaid that debt to him. She dreamed of making him happy. And I'm sure her disappearance saddens him. Kai asked her, would they keep going in a straight line? It wouldn't be too far to get lost. Rin answered that as long as they went straight ahead, they wouldn't get lost. Kai told her that if she really believed that, she obviously hadn't been in the woods much. Rin got angry and told him to keep his mouth shut. And in her head, she remembered that this guy had just recently behaved so horrifyingly. And what is this guy all about? Suddenly Kai saw her look and asked, did he have something on his face? Rin turned around and replied that there was nothing. But suddenly they heard strange shouts not far away from them, as if someone was fighting. Rin immediately said it was Mirei's voice. Kai also listened and replied that it looked like she was in trouble. What would they do next? Rin said of course they would help, and hoped she wasn't hurt. Kai looked over and showed her that surprisingly she was a goody-goody. Rin asked him, what did he think of her? It didn't matter anymore though, it was time for them to go and help her. At that moment, Mirei took a hard hit that she couldn't handle. Rhea asked her if she was okay. Mirei replied that it was fine and let the guy run away from here. Rhea was displeased and asked. Suddenly, the monster was already behind them and raised his sharp paw to finish the guys off. Rhea turned around and saw that things were bad. But suddenly Rin came running and using her spell told the monster to stop. Rhea looked at her and said she was their savior. Rin replied that things were bad and she wouldn't be able to keep him for long. Kai noticed at this point that Kanzuki's power had different effects on different opponents. He asked Rei if Mirai was alive. Ria replied that the wounds were serious, but she was still breathing. Kai told him to then pick her up and run away from here. Ria replied that he wasn't and he was with them. Kai asked him, is he going to leave her here to die slowly? Rhea lifted the girl onto his back, and as he left he said he owed them. Kai followed up by telling him to call Mito or Leonora here if he met them. Now Kai looked at the monster and realized that now it was their problem. So he decided to run the assessment. Opening the assessment he saw that it was an armored bear. And it had serious stats and especially defense. And by the looks of it he's got a tough coat. Even he can't penetrate it. Suddenly Rin said she couldn't take it anymore. The monster broke free of the enchantment and raised its paws into the air to attack. But Kai looked over and said they had bought enough time and it was time for them to run away too. Rin looked and replied that she agreed. But suddenly she fell to the ground and said that she apologized, but she couldn't feel her legs. And monster saw her fall and attacked her first. Kai had been there the whole time and saw that things were bad. But he didn't hesitate and threw a smoke grenade at the monster to distract it so he could steal Rin and escape. Kai was so fast that he didn't even lose time and hid. And Rin sat in his arms and was shocked too. Kai told her to keep quiet or he would spot them. The monster was looking around and didn't see the boys. Rin said that smoke, what was it? Kai replied that it was a simple smoke bomb. I made it out of boredom while they were practicing. Actually, that was a lie. He is always at least minimally armed, so he came into this world with his weapon. But his supply is limited, so he wouldn't really want to waste it unnecessarily. It's natural for an assassin to carry a weapon. Rin suddenly apologized to him. Kai was surprised and asked why. The girl replied that she was the one who said they would help them and ended up saving her. Kai replied that there was no need for her to apologize. If that was the way she wanted it, it was better to thank her. Rin listened to his words and said she was grateful to him. Kai told her that if she were always so polite, people would come to her in droves. Rin couldn't stand it and tried to yell at him. But Kai told her that he had asked her to be quiet. Rin looked at the monster and asked, what would they do next? The best thing to do would be to run with all their legs. Kai answered that no, there was no need for that. Suddenly monster started to look around and saw that more guys had come in. Mito and his team asked him if he was the one who hurt Narumi and Hashimoto, and now he's his opponent. And immediately activated the sword of protection from evil. And immediately stood in front of the monster. Mito stood in front of the monster with his sword and immediately they began to attack each other and fight to their last breath. But at the last moment, Mito dips down a bit and with a swing cuts the monster's neck. Mito felt that his opponent was proving to be powerful. And Rina decided not to stand aside either and shouted at Shuji to move aside and immediately used a fire attack and decided to roast it alive. The monster failed this attack and suffered greatly inside the fire. Rina rejoiced and said that she knew he wouldn't stand up to it. Mito looked over and told Rina that she was doing a good job. But the monster turned out to still be alive and was very angry with them after all this. Rina was shocked and asked how come? Mito answered her to keep calm, and her attack worked too. And the monster slowed down a bit. And the three of them can beat it as long as they take their time. Rina didn't refuse and replied that she understood. The girl also said that the order was understood. Mito decided to attack the monster first and attack, then wait for the girls to do their tasks as well. At this moment, the experienced demon assassin Delphis began to laugh and said that it was only a matter of time, and an armored bear can't beat it. This speed of development and what peace of mind. And looking at the student named Mito, he realized that this guy was special, and he just wanted to do a little recon, but he's gonna have to change plans and finish him off here. Mito at this point was on his way with his last and strongest attack and brought it to an end. After this, Mito even shouted to himself to end it and take that lesson with him to the other world. The demon realized that in this world, after killing an opponent, one should never relax. The demon felt a knife at his throat that would have cut his neck at any moment. Kai told him to get it in his head. Never let your guard down before you kill. The demon let go of his weapon on the ground and raised his hands to show what he was surrendering, and answered the boy that he would remember. But in his head he couldn't believe he'd caught him off guard. And now he had to figure out a way to escape. But Kai was always smarter than them, and to make him immobile, cut his legs open. The demon fell to the floor and started screaming about his legs. But Kai presented his knife and told him not to yell like that. And it would be too much trouble if Mito and his friends noticed them. Kai told him that he had questions for him, and if he answered, he would get his freedom. The demon got angry and asked the boy who was he to answer his questions. Kai didn't hide it and answered that he was a shadow from another world. The demon was stunned and shocked when he heard such words. And now Kai realizes that that eerie aura was coming from this particular demon. Kai said he knew we were being followed, but there was no way he could track him down, so he used Mito as bait. The demon asked the boy, did he know about him from the beginning? Kai answered that they came from another world, so he had little information about the structure of this world. And he wants Demon to tell him everything he knows about demons. Demon asked him, does he think he's just going to talk like that? Kai was very serious about torture, and making a few cuts on his arms left him limbless. Kai said that frankly, it would be more useful for him to talk if he didn't want to go to hell on earth. The demon was intensely angry and realized that the kid was just not underestimating him. But in a moment he released a strange creature from his body. And after that he began to choke on his own poisonous death. Kai looked and was also surprised that he had suicide poison, and they're apparently thorough, the Demon King's army. And he feels they're gonna be nothing but trouble. Suddenly a system opened up in front of him and Kai asked what's in there? But suddenly Rin suddenly came up and asked the guy if he was dead. Kai was surprised to see her next to him, and asked her how much did she see. Rin answered that not much, only how he fell. Kai said it was an assassin from the Demon King's army. Rin asked in surprise, the Demon King's army? Kai replied that yes, he did. That bear is his puppet, and the monster that attacked Nagase and her friends was his work. Rin asked, so he was trying to kill them? Kai replied that it was natural that the Demon King's army would send someone to kill the hero candidates. Rin said that right too and realized she was too naive, and asked the guy how he noticed him? After all, he was the only one who knew about him, and now Kai decided he had no more reason to hide. He said that in their home world he had worked part-time as a contract killer, so he sensed a co-worker in the neighborhood. Rin was shocked to hear about contract killings, so she asked him what he was talking about. Kai replied that it was up to her to believe him or not, but it was a fact that there was a dead body. Kai told her after all this to not tell anyone about what she saw today, and the class is already on edge because of Hashimoto's injury. Rin didn't refuse him and agreed, and told the guy that he was surprisingly kind, and asked why be so considerate of his classmates' feelings. Kai replied that unlike him, they were not used to fighting. In his head, Kai was already realizing that Kanzaki's control could be useful to him in the future. Student number 34, Hano Shiori's blessing of healing, was treating a girl who was injured. Shiori used the healing beam and said that she was asking for magic to help her heal her wounds. Using all her powers, she went over her entire body to heal her completely. After all this, everyone was in shock. Ria asked, how is she? And would she be alright? Shiori replied she thought in an hour she would be completely fine. Ria sighed and rejoiced at the good news, and told her that she was just an amazing healer. That hulking woman was freakishly strong. Mito said that yes, indeed this monster was strong, but together they would defeat anyone. Kai was listening to their conversations at this point, and seeing Rin's gaze he asked what she was looking at him like that for. The girl turned around and replied that it was nothing. Just then Leonora came in and said that as she could see they were all back already. But Rhea was not pleased and asked where they had been all this time. Gaius replied, not far from the forest. We're doing their job and looking out for them. Rhea asked, then why didn't they help them? Gaius replied that whatever training it was they helped them every time. Mito also came up and told the Lord that she was in danger and could even die. Guy replied that in a real battle, anyone's life is at risk of death. And from now on, they'll only have such battles ahead of them. So there's no need to whine about something so trivial. Mito told the Lord that he had deceived them. Didn't he himself say earlier that there were only weak monsters in this forest? Leonora immediately came out and replied that it was most likely the work of an assassin demon. The students were shocked and asked, a killer demon? Leonora replied that originally there had never been armored bears in this forest, and most likely used it to gauge their strength. Gaius also said that he believed he was still hiding somewhere in the forest. Leonora confirmed and replied that they needed to increase security. They also need to step up their training or they will all just get killed. The students asked if reinforced, would it be even harder? Aren't they already working at their limit? Mito told the missus that this is ridiculous. It's their first real fight, everyone's worried. Leonora replied that even though it was ridiculous, they had to go through with it or they would die. Erasher listened to them all and got angry and said that they had called them here and now he was also giving them orders. But suddenly Gaius appeared in front of him and said he would speak now so that there would be no misunderstanding. They're all just pawns of Mrs. Leonora. Let them not think they have the right to disobey her. Erasher rejoiced and said that this was where he would be killed. But Mito stopped him and told him to calm down. Erasher was shocked and asked him, is he telling him to calm down? Mito replied that if they went against them, they would make an entire state their enemy. and they wouldn't stand a chance. Guy said that as he expected, Mito is well aware of their situation. They are valuable pawns to them, and as long as they are obedient, no one will get hurt. Erasure gave no sign of hatred and asked what to go against a whole country. He rejoiced and saying fine swooped down to attack. Guy was shocked and didn't expect such a thing. But Erasure used the fire technique and activated the explosion at the last moment. Erasure thought he had already dealt with the old man and said it was nothing. But then Gaius came out of the smoke and immediately hit him on the head with his fist. Erasure couldn't even dodge or anticipate such a thing and lay on the ground with a battered face. Guy said this is what they can do. And from tomorrow, they're in for a rigorous training session. Erasure stood up and said that he would definitely finish that old man off. And then he would mock his body. The day after combat practice, Steady said he was ordered by Mrs. Leonora to today become the leader of their training. And speaking of which, someone got hurt yesterday. Did everyone recover in time? Mireille said it was her. And everything's already healed thanks to Shiori's healing. And that asshole is fine too. She pointed her finger at Erasure. Steady said that means there was healing among the blessings. And now he's going to explain the training to them. And this is his research center. And it's where they're going to fight the monsters tonight. Mito asked, in other words, is this place overrun with monsters? Steady lowered his glasses and replied that it would be easier if they saw it once. Opening the doors of their center behind the bars sat goblins, lizard vala, and ogre. Steady told the boys that these were all his collection of monsters to experiment on. Leonora continued that the Steady Research Center is also used as a field training ground for soldiers. Steady replied that it was very beneficial to him because he could gather data on different types of monsters based on their battles. And just like that, their combat practice began. They began to fight real monsters at full strength. Kai, as always, stood back and surprisingly saw that his classmates were calm for those who had been thrown onto the battlefield without consent. And even yesterday's experience is having an effect. Although there is still fear in their movements. After all, Rena can't fight at full strength. Rena was not an easy girl and she didn't even plan to give up. But Ogre was not weak either and was ready to continue. Upon seeing this, Mito turned to Steady and said that this monster was too dangerous. But Steady replied that he didn't think so. Mrs. Leonora had specifically asked him to be tougher on them, and they don't seem to fully understand. First of all, a hero candidate who has received divine blessing would never lose to such a weak monster. Rena suddenly got angry and told the monster that he was already pissing her off big time, and spat out a strong flame from her hands. And by burning Orc alive, Steady was saying it was all about desire. They've been capable of doing this from the beginning. It's their fear and hesitation that keeps them from doing it. Mito asked, is that the only problem? Steady replied that, with the increase in divine blessing level, there was even a chance of getting another blessing. Suddenly Kai walked up to them and told Mito that he had one thing to do with him. The boy turned around and asked, what is it? Kai replied that his assessment had found him to have another blessing. And that new blessing is this. Mito was surprised and asked the gentleman if he could come out next. Steady replied that of course. That's what their combat training is for. Upon entering the battlefield, Mito immediately activated his sword defending against evil. He also activated a deadly attack on the monster. The orc, upon seeing his opponent, immediately began to tremble. Mito was shocked and asked, is he afraid? But he didn't care and running to attack told the monster not to expect mercy. And now he's already attacking. The orc realized that he was no match against him and at the last moment put his hand in front of his face and lost an arm from the guy's attack. But Mito didn't stop there and decided to get rid of him completely by chopping off his head. Kai watched it all and realized that with such strength, even an armored bear wouldn't be much of a problem. Which means that as his grade level rises, he too can receive a new blessing. And if you look at it that way, there's another one who's had his blessing level raised. And that would be Erasure. But Kai thought about it and decided there was no point in telling him about it. And so the power of the blessing could increase. And in this world, standard methods won't work. And it looks like he needs training too. In the evening at night, while everyone is resting, Erasure decided to gather all the students in one room. After telling them his plan, Rhea asked him if he was serious about what he was saying. Erasure confidently replied that he was. And first they would kill Guy, and then they capture Leonora and beat it out of her to find a way to get back to their world. The servants rejoiced and said it was time to get out of this world, and if they kill Leonora as well, then we can have no fear of them calling on them again. Erasure told Ray to join them. He too was fed up with their outings. Rhea asked, what are the chances that they'll make it work? Erasure replied that with him they should increase many times over. Rhea really just wants to return to their world. Why he has to kill someone to do that, he still can't understand. But Rhea thought hard about what he said and said he was in agreement to go with them. The next day they had already started training early in the morning. Kai still stood by and saw how eager they were to train. Suddenly Mito turned to him and told him that he was still too weak, so he needed to find a way to get stronger. Kai replied that he could already defeat more than half of the knights in this country. Mito said that he is still unable to overpower Guy, and he doesn't like that. He needs more power, and he won't be satisfied until he can protect all of them. Kai asked the guy what he thought about Leonora. Mito replied that to her they were just pawns in her plan, and he doesn't think Gaius was lying when he said they wouldn't be harmed as long as they followed orders. Kai said, which then means if she orders them to fight the Demon King to the death. Mito replied that that was correct, and everything had already been decided. But he would be the one to fight him. He would defeat the Demon King as the hero of this country, and in exchange he'll try to bargain a better life for all of them. Kai said it was a good plan, but did he think Leonora would agree to something like that? Mito replied that he was swinging his sword just for her recognition. Suddenly Gaius came up to them and told them that they would all give it their best. Steady went out and met Mistress Leonora, and Mistress told him that while they were gone the hero candidates would remain in his care. Steady agreed and replied that Mistress could count on him. Rena heard too and asked Mistress, are they going somewhere? Leonora replied that yes, they would be gone for a few days. Steady will be their curator for that time, and on that she could deviate. Steady suddenly looked at them with a smile on his face, a little pleased that even a smile appeared on his face. On the way out Gaius asked his mistress if all was well. Leonora was surprised and asked him back what was he talking about. Gaius replied that he wished she would stop playing dumb. Erasure is up to something, that's for sure. Leonora sipped her tea and said he would probably try to rebel against them. Guy asked her what she planned to do. Leonora replied that she wondered what he would come up with. And for now, they would turn a blind eye. Guy says he's okay with it, but he's still developing. And he's a candidate for hero. Albeit small, there is a chance they will team up. Leonora showed him and told him that they could not defeat her. And it would be impossible even if they all turned against her. Gaius listened and replied to the lady that she was right, but didn't she think it was even beneficial to them? Mistress replied that she wanted to gradually begin to show them where their place in the world was. And this uprising is the perfect excuse to break their claws. There's another suspicious person, should we leave her alone? She asked. That same day at night, Kai went out into the woods and got caught by the monster. She chased him and he tried to run away. But Kai decided to use his abilities against the monster and made a leap into the sky and launched a knife at the monster's head. Kai looked and said that this monster he was able to kill in 13 seconds. And immediately activated the assessment. Kai saw that everything was unchanged and realized that he had raised his level by killing that demon. Now the question was how to put it to work. Kai felt that he was not alone, and someone was attacking him from behind. When he turned around, he saw another monster. The ogre threw a punch, but the guy managed to dodge and the monster missed. But he didn't stop there and continued to attack again. But Kai was not confused, and taking out 3 knives from his pocket he decided to use them all at once against the monster. But the ogre just stood still and didn't even feel the guy's attack. And Kai realized that this monster was tough, but he knew this was the perfect opportunity to experiment. So he immediately activated the weakness display. Finding the monster's weak spot, he saw that it was on the back of his head. He immediately decided to attack it right in the sore spot. Hitting right on target, the ogre began to growl in pain and fell to the ground like a dead body without surviving long. Kai said the skill showed him the softest part of the ogre's skin. And now it's clear how the weakness mapping works. But it's not bad power for him, but it's not enough. He won't last long in this world. And he needs to get stronger. But that wasn't all. After killing the monster, a pack of goblins with bats chased after him. Kai started to run away again and used the display of weaknesses. Seeing the weaknesses, it turned out to be their heads. Kai turned around sharply in the moment and fired several knives at once right at their weak points. Kai said that of course their weak points were their brain and heart, and against normal monsters the skill was quite useful. And for some reason he decided to look for other kinds of monsters to test the skill. Suddenly he heard with his hearing that someone was coming this way. Immediately he hid. He saw the shadow of a man who was heading straight for him. And then Rin came out of the shadow looking for him. Kai asked her what she was doing here in the middle of the night. Rin replied that she'd been up and down the dormitory looking for him. So I decided to check the forest just in case, and I was right. Kai said it was dangerous to be in the woods at night. Hurry back to the dormitory. Rin got angry and replied that she should be the one saying that. Kai said that he was used to the nighttime restrictions and she wasn't. And fighting monsters in pitch darkness isn't easy. Rin answered him to stop. "What's he doing here anyway?" she asked. Kai made no secret of it and replied that he was experimenting with a new blessing. Rin asked in surprise, "What new blessing?" Kai asked her if she remembered Steady's words. By increasing the level of blessing, they can receive other blessings. Rin thought for a moment and asked what new blessing he had gotten. Kai asked back, what was the point of telling him? Rin replied that it was a waste of time for her to come here. Kai was surprised and turned around to ask if she was worried. Rin blushed after saying that and replied that no. That wasn't what she meant. But Kai said whatever, let her go back to her place and he would experiment a little more here. But Rin wouldn't leave and said that she would go with him. But suddenly she noticed something off to the side. Seeing the firelight, she asked, "What's going on in there?" "And it's smoke." Kai looked too and was surprised to see smoke with his eyes. At that moment, there was a house behind the forest that was already on fire. It was in flames. All the monsters were outside and were ready to attack the humans. And the disciples were in an awkward position and stood in front of them. At the moment, Mireille ran out of the house and ran right into Ogre. She was very scared and didn't even know what to do. But Mito saw this and was next to it. He immediately grabbed his sword and destroyed the monster. Mito asked her if she was okay. The girl replied that she was fine and thanked him. The goblins that had been released outside were already standing in front of them. Mito was angry and said there was no end to them. He grabbed his sword and prepared to fight them, but suddenly the fire came upon them and burned them alive. And from outside, Rina appeared and said that she had slept so well. She asked, "What's going on here? Where did they come from?" But Erishur replied that it was not the time to ask questions. First, you have to get rid of them. Kai and Rin ran as hard as they could home to see if everyone was safe and save them. Seeing their dormitory, Kai said that it looks like the monster fight is in full swing. Rhea saw them and replied that they were here and it was good that no one was hurt. Kai replied that they were out for a short walk. "What the hell is going on here?" Rhea answered him not to be asked, he didn't know himself. He had just escaped the fire and there was a horde of monsters. Kai thought about it and said it was more like human methods. There must be a puppeteer somewhere nearby, and we must track him down and catch him. Suddenly a voice came out of nowhere and told Caius that he had the right idea and called him a hero candidate. And looking at the house, they saw that Steady was above the house, and he must have done it. Kai said that he kept wondering where a whole bunch of monsters were coming from, but if he was behind everything, it makes sense. They're monsters from his research center. Steady replied that they were his cute specimens, and he had to enhance them with drugs to make them suitable for his plan. Kai asked him what his purpose was. What benefit does it give him to kill hero candidates? Steady replied that he had received orders from above to destroy the hero candidates even at the cost of his own position, and he holds no grudge against them personally, but they will have to die. Rin asked, "Is that an order from Leonora?" Steady replied that no, and she was wrong. That fox had nothing to do with it. After all, it was actually the Demon King himself who had ordered it so. Ray asked, "Is he a spy of the Demon King's army?" Steady replied that that was correct. If he succeeded in this assignment, he would be allowed to continue his research. Kai asked, so engrossed in his monster research that he was rotten to the bone. Steady replied that he could not know the full mysterious nature of monsters as long as he remained human. Steady stood over the kingdom and giving orders to his monsters. He himself stood and watched the monsters destroy the kingdom and the students. Kai stood at this moment and immediately told Rin to use her abilities. The girl heard the order and told them with about to stop. And after all that, she told the monsters to attack Steady. But Guy said it was a pathetic attempt. Suddenly he told the monsters in his voice to wake up. The monsters heard his order and came to their senses. But Rin was shocked and asked how so? Steady replied that he was researching monsters. Had she forgotten? He'll always have a way to subdue them if they get violent. And gave them orders to attack. Kai saw that she was in danger and told her to duck. And Steady was very happy about it and mockingly told the monsters to still attack and get even bigger. But Kai didn't stop at just them and continued to kill one monster after another. But suddenly he was a little distracted as he was killing the lizard, and Ogre was already behind him to strike. Kai sensed the danger and turned around and kicked him in the leg. All the monsters suddenly stopped and looked at him with fear. They were shocked that they couldn't handle him. Steady was starting to get angry now and asked the monsters what was wrong with him. This guy doesn't even have a useful blessing. Kai activated his evaluation at that moment and looked at the characterization of the enemy named Steady and saw that Steady had the slave sorcery skill. And now it's clear to him that Rin's control didn't work because the monsters got a higher level order. Earlier he remembered Steady telling him that he had the right idea. After all, strong demons can control monsters, and they use a technique called slave sorcery to do so. Steady suddenly said he didn't mean to use it, but it couldn't be helped. And suddenly he started whistling. Kai looked at him and asked what he was up to. Steady smiled and answered him that he would understand soon. But Kai started to walk towards him and said he would get rid of him faster, but suddenly sensed danger and stepped aside. And then just as suddenly a fire attack came. Kai looked up and asked, "What is that?" And he saw a fire dragon appear in the sky above the city. Steady started laughing and said it was a red dragon, his best trump card. The dragon immediately saw the new prey in front of him and set out to attack and burn everything in its path. But behind him he destroyed the stone house and the stones were headed straight for the boys. Rin was shocked and realized that she couldn't dodge the rocks and was already and said goodbye to her life. But Kai saw this and immediately ran to save her. Kai asked her if she was okay. Rin couldn't say a word to him for she was shocked that he had saved her. Kai asked Ray too if he was okay. The guy replied that he didn't know how but he survived. Kai told him that the next attack was coming soon and to take Rin with him and get out of here. Rhea understood the order and grabbing Rin started to run away. Kai stood still and stood against the red dragon telling him to get even closer. Kai used his eye and saw that the dragon's weak spot was in its throat. When he saw this he didn't stop and without wasting time he jumped right on top of him and slashed him with his knife. But when he turned around he saw that the dragon was still alive. And his body was strong. And with its strength, it couldn't even be scratched. Kai saw that the dragon had already opened its mouth to release the flames and began to think. And suddenly Erishur showed up and said, "What's going on here? And this monster is so huge and just to his liking." Erishur pounced on him with his blast attack and yelled at him to die. Rejoicing, Erishur asked the dragon how he felt about it. But he was shocked when he saw that the dragon had attacked him with fire. Kai looked at all this and told him there was nothing to relax about. But he thought that with his punching power they could stand up to the dragon. Erishur stood up and grabbed his arm and said it hurt. Kai decided to take matters into his own hands and told him to listen carefully. Kai told him that together they could defeat him. Erishur was surprised and asked what use he was to him. Kai replied that he knew his weaknesses, but his power wasn't enough to get to them. Erishur asked, and did he just decide to leave it up to him? But he's not going to team up with a lowlife. Kai looked up and said he was coming back. The dragon came up and tried to attack them with his tail. But the boys had time and jumped during the attack. The dragon didn't stop and began to charge up its energy to attack with flames. Erishur looked at all this and was already at his limit because he was tired of dodging attacks. But the dragon directed its flame right at him and the guy did not move away and just covered his face with his hands. Kai told him that if he was so sure he could kill him alone, Grace was asking him to act then already. Erishur realized he couldn't handle him alone and asked the guy where he should hit. Kai replied that there was an inverted scale on his throat. Does he see it with his eyes? Erishur looked at her closely and when he saw her he asked if it was her. Kai replied that he would distract him and let Erishur hit the scales with a blast. Could he do the job? Erishur was happy and replied that of course and it was time to act. He clenched his fists and prepared to attack. Steady started to panic too and asked the dragon what he was poking around for, and ordered the red dragon to kill them now. The dragon heard its master's command and prepared to release its flames again. But suddenly something went wrong and the dragon decided to fly up and use his wings to entertain them. Kai and Erishur tried to counter his attack, but the fire and flames were hitting their bodies. But Kai used his knives and took him on and began to distract him. Running to the side, the dragon turned around and chased after him. But the dragon was faster and suddenly tried to grab the boy with its sharp teeth. But Kai dodged it and stepped aside. Kai picked up that very moment and immediately shouted to Erishur. The boy heard his voice and replied that he understood everything. And standing under his weak point, Erishur attacked with all his might at the point and shouted at the dragon to die. And activated his blast. Hitting that very spot with Arashi's strongest punch, the dragon couldn't stand it and began to growl in pain. But his death was much quicker than the boys had anticipated. The dragon did not resist for long and collapsed to the ground. Steady was shocked and couldn't believe that his monster had been defeated. Erishur started laughing and said she was nothing. Kai told him he was able to say that even though he could barely stand on his feet, Erishur turned around and told him to shut up. Kai turned next to the culprit and asked what he would do next without his trump. Steady replied that that wasn't all. He had many more monsters. But when he looked around, he saw that they were all dead. Mito also came over and said that they had already dealt with the other monsters. Steady realized things were bad and decided to run away. But Rhea immediately got behind him and said he wouldn't run away, and immediately pushed him off the tower. But the boys decided to save him and used the power of water to soften his fall. Kai walked over to him and putting the knife in front of his face said that he had attacked them in the middle of the night but had taken the battle too long, and now he had tons of questions for him. Steady is scared and asks him to stop, because he'll say anything. Just wants mercy. But suddenly Steady immediately felt bad that even his face changed completely. But without saying a word, he died. Kai looked over and said he was a dead man. Mito asked the guy what was that just now. Kai replied that it could be some kind of curse technique. As he dug through the library archives, he found information about such a thing. Mito said that means the curse killed him because he was willing to share information with them. Kai replied that it looked like the threat from the Demon King's army towards them was only going to grow. The day after the incident with Steady, everyone was devastated. And Leonora was shocked and said that she couldn't believe that something like this had happened in their absence. Ria told her that she was the one who'd entrusted them to Steady. Don't let her say she didn't have a clue. Leonora apologized and replied that there must have been a misunderstanding. What she meant to say was that she didn't expect that much damage from a monster lord of Steady's level. And that was the meaning of her words. Rina told her that means she knew who Steady was from the beginning and didn't do anything about it. Leonora replied that she had told them that they would have to toughen up their training, hadn't she? This is just the beginning. A student said they almost died. He set fire to the dormitory while most were asleep. Gaius told him not to cry. They must not let their guard down even at night or they would die instantly. Kai thought and realized that even he couldn't spot this horde of monsters in time. And to ask such a thing of ordinary school children was madness. Leonora left it at that and said it was time to get to the main topic. I am glad to inform them that they will be leaving for the capital soon. Mito asked why they were going there. Leonora replied that hero candidates are the hottest topic in the entire kingdom right now. And they're about to have a parade in their honor. The people would be pleased to see the celebrants alive. After that they set out at once, and at night Gaius told the warriors that today they would stop here. They would move out at dawn. After taking a smoke break, the students spread out and set up their stoves to keep warm. But suddenly Arasi said that there were 30 people here. The guys were surprised and asked him what he was talking about. Arashir replied about the guards that were attached to them. He did not see anyone serious among them. The guy also said he thought Arashir would take them all down in one blow. Arashir answered him to turn his head on. This is a great chance for their plan. The disciple understood the words of the person in charge and said exactly. Usually there are much more soldiers around them, but here there are only 30 and weaker than them. Arashir said they don't trust them with anything. They don't even think they would dare to revolt, and they're definitely going to bail tonight. And have the guys call Ray and the rest of the guys who will be involved. Kai had been standing beside them the whole time and realized that Arashir was right. They didn't have many soldiers assigned to them, and they were all weak. But the reason is simply that Leonora and Guy are confident in their own abilities. And now he needs more time to understand them. Kai walked up to Mito and asked if he would give him a moment. The guy was shocked and didn't even know what had happened, and a group of disciples had already retreated into the forest and were on standby to execute their plan. Arashir asked if everyone but the guards were asleep. Rhea replied that it looked like they were. But then Mito got in their way and told Arashir to stand still. And he heard that he was planning to kill Leonora and all the soldiers, isn't that right? Arashir asked him who had told him about it. Mito replied that he himself had overheard it when he was passing by his tent. Rina asks, does he seriously want to kill them? She's pissed off by them too, but this is getting kind of crazy. Arashir replied that they were the only ones who were crazy. How much longer are they going to let this woman get away with this? Mito replied that he understood his feelings, but killing was not the answer. Arashir said they were all good talkers, but did he have a plan? Mito replied that he would become Leonora's pawn and defeat the Demon King, and in return, he would ask her to provide the others with safety and shelter. Arashir asked, did he think she would take it? Mito replied that he was sure if he got stronger and she would have to listen to him. Arashir said that even if it worked, he didn't need his protection. And let him go from here, and he'd take off to his original world. Mito replied that since he was so serious, they would have to stop him. Arashir was angry when he heard his words and told him lastly not to complain later, and went to attack. Mito was already at the ready and repelled the attack. He immediately sensed that Arashir was fast and even strong, and Arashir was shocked that this guy was able to block his punch. And then the guards saw them and asked what they were doing there. Mito apologized and replied that it was just a little spat. The guard told them to get up at dawn tomorrow, let them go to bed already. Arashir didn't fight any further and turned around and said it was boring. And his softness was getting annoying. The next day at dawn, they arrived at the sacred kingdom of Digrest. And this was the capital city. Ria was shocked and said it was amazing. And that's what the capital really is. Mireille also said that it's full of people here, it's annoying. Rina also replied that it's still not as bad as Tokyo. When people saw the new residents, they were shocked and even realized who they were. And what they were doing here. Gaius shouted for everyone to spread out. And along comes Saint Leonora and a group of hero candidates. People wondered and asked, candidates for heroes? Chosen by God himself. Everyone was in joy and shouted to meet them. Kai told the boys that he didn't think they had been lied to when they said the townspeople were hoping for them. Rin also said that it made her feel kind of creepy. But then Rhines, the holy knight himself, stepped in front of them and said that he welcomed the esteemed hero candidates. And the first thing they should do is to get a good night's rest. The boys came to their rooms and threw themselves on the bed, saying that there was such a soft bed. And sleeping on the ground was just unbearable. And the girls were in the bathroom and said it was like they were back in their lives. And Arashir was already at the table and eating, saying it was delicious. And let the servants bring more. And Mito didn't waste any time and started training right away to become stronger. And Kai was in the castle looking out over the whole town. And he realized that he had to gather information first. Kai began to walk around the castle and saw that there were a pond of guards. And he knew it would be very risky to move around the castle. But suddenly he looked out the window and saw the knight who had met and escorted them not so long ago. The knight had a conversation with the guards. One of them asked hero candidates and what should be done with them. Rains replied that they were most likely resting in the guest rooms right now. The guard asked, were they seriously chosen by the Recreator? The knight replied that they had powers that mere children shouldn't have, so it must be true. The guard asked him, isn't he worried about the possibility of action from the believers of the Demon King? And by inviting the hero candidates to the capital, they could provoke them. The second guard also said it was true, and they've been spotted acting suspiciously lately. They should be as careful as possible. Kai listened to all their words and thought about the believers in the Demon King. Rain said the hero candidates are in the capital with them, and should they be so worried about these believers? The guards started laughing and replied that was also true. And after that, Rain said that training would start soon, and they should get going now. Kai was curious at this point, and thought that maybe he should go to town to find out more. That same night, Kai went to the pub and told the shopkeeper to pour him a glass of ale. The shopkeeper replied that everything was coming up. But suddenly, at a neighboring table, a drunk asked his friend if he had seen the candidates for heroes. The guy told him to stop. They were approved by the saint herself. If the church found out what he was saying, he'd be in trouble. Kai thought that apparently the church has a lot of influence in this country. They fear her more than the king or the aristocrats. The shopkeeper came over and brought him a drink. But Kai said he was a traveler and didn't know much about local traditions. Can I ask him a few questions? The shopkeeper told him to ask, and he didn't care. Kai said that everyone here is talking about some believers in the Demon King. The shopkeeper asked, she was aware that they were now at war with the Demon King's army. The Demon King who rules this army seems to many to be an all-powerful monster. And there are those among the humans who admire and worship his power. Kai asked, are these the same believers? The shopkeeper replied that was correct. These sectarians are rampant all over the country. Recently they blew up several aristocratic houses. Kai said that sounds like a serious problem. And now it's clear, so they're some kind of terrorists. After everything he'd learned, Kai headed into town. He thought that everyone here believed that only hero candidates could defeat the Demon King, and the believers hiding in the capital may soon spring into action. That's what everyone's so excited about. Suddenly Rin shouted to him and told him that he had finally found him, and asked him where he had been all this time. Kai replied that he didn't know anything about the capital, so he needed to gather information. Rin said he understands, but you can't act alone. And if he asks, she is always ready to help him. Kai says he can handle it. Just don't let him stand out and stay close to the class. Rin was displeased and asked why he was acting like this. I mean, she tells him she can help him. Kai thought about it and said okay, and he thinks she can help her. We need to gather as much information as possible. Would she be able to ask around town? Rin got excited and asked, really? And since it was necessary, she could help him. But things turned out to be much more complicated after Rin went to get the information. A guy in a suit followed them and heard everything they said. Back in his room, Kai realized that in the end he had learned nothing useful, but enough of what he had learned about their new enemy. But suddenly he heard strange shouting and thought, what's all this noise in the middle of the night? Immediately he opened the door and went out into the main room. Kai asked what was going on here. Mirai answered him that they couldn't find Rin anywhere. And Mitono, who shares a room with her, noticed that she hadn't returned. That's why they're looking for Rin. But where could she have gone? Kai thought he hadn't been around for a long time either. But he lived alone and might not have been noticed. He said it made him worry. Mito asked him if he knew anything. Kai replied that he didn't. He just had no idea. And he slept in his room. Mito thought for a moment and said that they knew for sure she wasn't in the castle. It would be dark soon, and it would be time to look for her outside. But Rina replied that she could do without the NI too. Well, if he says so, they'll be looking too. Kai realized that in fact it was already deep into the night. All the townspeople were asleep. Kai came to the town and to the place where he talked to her. But suddenly he saw a card on the ground and realizing it saw that it belonged to Rin. It was Rin's student card. But all of a sudden, mercenaries suddenly swooped down on him from different directions. But Kai had already sensed earlier that they were watching him. He immediately began to repel their attacks. Kai didn't play with them for long, and by killing each of them, he didn't leave them a chance to win. Kai left one of them alone and said amateurs both in the wielding of the sword and in the ability to conceal themselves. But the simplest people, what do they want? Kai asked. The mercenary holding the sword trembled violently. Kai made his eyes red and told the guy that he would tell everything. At that moment, Rin was tied up with a rope and endured the beating. The boys mocked her and said they were very scared, and their hearts were almost broken. Rin told them to question them all they wanted. The answer would be the same. She won't tell them anything. The guy replied that they only wanted to talk about the hero candidates. They would just like to know a little bit. The guys were such brutes that they ripped off her clothes with their bare hands and left her standing there in her underwear. The guy said they're about to see how long she keeps her mouth shut. That's a sight to behold. Kai was already at the spot where they were holding Rin and saw the two amateurs standing in front of him. But he had little faith that they were able to capture Rin. But Kai didn't waste any more time and fired 2 knives at their heads. Kai immediately came out and asked her if she was okay. Rin was happy to see him and apologized to him. Kai told her that she would tell her the details later, but right now they needed to get out of here. Rin broke free and thanked herself for her rescue. Suddenly Kai felt that they were not alone here, and there was another person. Suddenly someone attacked them. Kai decided he needed to save Rin, and taking her in his arms, he dodged the enemy's attack. Night Rains came out of the shadows and said the guy dodged his sword. They shouldn't be left alive after all. Kai looked over and said he was the knight after all. The holy Night Rains. Rains got angry and asked if the head of the Church of the Demon King was better. But Kai asked back, and the enemy got so close to the top? This country doesn't have long to live. Rains replied that by killing all the hero candidates they would bring the day of destruction closer. Kai stood in front of the enemy and used his clan score to see what the knight was capable of. Kai saw that all the stats were at AB level. A versatile guy. And you can't let your guard down. The knight looked at the guy and headed to attack with his large and powerful sword. But Kai was already prepared for this, and immediately dodged his first attack. And the knight swept his sword across the ground. But he didn't stop there and used fire magic that burned his enemies and released balls of flame from the seal. Kai was a little surprised that the knight had fire techniques as well. But in a moment he was shocked by what he saw. The knight came very close to him and said that he could not dodge the air. But Kai did not hesitate and sent his knife at him. But the knight said it was useless. So he used the Shroud of Fire. The knight says it's over. And now it's time for the hero candidate to say goodbye to his life. But Kai was already prepared, and not taking any chances he pulled out his gun and decided to shoot. But the knight didn't even realize he had a weapon as suddenly a bullet hit him in the head. Kai realized that he wasn't going to use it here. After all, the number of bullets was limited. That jump was a bad move. And now he needed to hone his melee skills if he wanted to survive in this world. Rin came out too and asked with surprise, "A gun?" Kai replied that he was an assassin, so naturally he had one. Rin said that once he thinks of his classmate having a gun at his side, it gets scary. Still, he's grateful to him. He came here to save her. Kai replied that it was just a coincidence. And important at this point, others. Couldn't she use the power of control? Rin replied that yes, she did. Those handcuffs prevented him from using his powers. Kai realized that meant now, and there were such tools. He turned around and started to leave and told her to get out of here too. But Rin was shocked and said that if she understood correctly, these people were going to attack their classmates. Kai replied that he had heard it too. And the guy who tried to bring him here told everything. Earlier, the guy had asked him that Kai not kill him. But Kai told him that it all depended on how he would behave. The guy replied that he was just following orders. The hero candidates are insulting the Demon King by their existence. They should all be killed. Kai asked him, did they kill Rin too? The guy replied that she was still alive. They wanted to use her as a hostage during the attack on the others. They came into town at dawn, and Kai said that unlike the Steedy, the curse didn't shut them up. And they don't cooperate with demons. Rin replied that it was a group of fans. She thought the people in this world were their allies. Kai said not to let her fool herself. They were able to put those handcuffs on her because she let her guard down, isn't he right? Rin answered him to shut up. They were so polite when she asked them questions. Kai asked, and she didn't seem suspicious? Their enemies are demons, but you can't rely on humans either. Rin replied that she was sorry she was so naive. Suddenly Mito ran up and shouted to her. Mito walked over and said thank goodness they were in one piece. Rin apologized for making her worry. Mito said the important thing was that they weren't hurt. Was he the one who found Rin? Kai replied that he was. He needed to talk to him about something important. Mito understood his words and said that something had happened after all. After listening to everything he asked with surprise, Demon King Church? Kai replied that they are a group of fanatics who believe in the omnipotence of the Demon King and help him get rid of humans. And now their target is them, the hero candidates. Mito asked, are they attacking humans? Unlike monsters, it would be problematic to figure out their opponents. Kai replied that that was correct. They should warn the others. Mito agreed and said that they should tell Leonora as well. It wouldn't hurt them to have extra guards, but Rin said that she thought even if they did tell her, she would just reply that they should handle it themselves. Mito replied that that was definitely correct. Anyway, we need to gather the others and decide what to do. They're looking for her all over the city now. But suddenly they saw a strange smoke behind the houses which had already covered the whole town and everything stank. Immediately after this, they were surrounded by the men who had previously kidnapped Rin and tortured her. Mito said that they were attacking the points where Rin's search teams were. Kai suddenly replied that they were already approaching, and have everyone get ready. But suddenly after a while, all the disciples gathered in the center of the city and were surrounded by mercenaries. Kai immediately made an assessment and saw that there were 6 and in skills far weaker than Rain's. And it's just a combat squad. The mercenaries didn't wait long and immediately all pounced on the students at once. Kai immediately turned to Rin. Rin, hearing his voice, immediately realized everything and used magic to make them stop. The mercenaries didn't expect this turn of events and stopped all at once. Kai took advantage of the moment and immediately fired several knives at their heads. The mercenaries had no idea it would turn out like this. They were all killed at once. But Mito was unhappy with his decision and told Caillou that they were humans, not monsters. Kai asked, so what of it? The important thing was that they were their enemies. Mito still wasn't happy with everything and started to refuse. But Kai said that while he was chatting, another one appeared. Mito immediately felt the mercenary behind him, but immediately turned around and repelled his attack. Mito asked him, why are they acting like monsters? The mercenary replied that it was all for their lord. Rin wanted to help him, but Kai put up his hand and stopped her. The guy told her to stay out of it. It was time for Mito to stop being so soft. Mito was not confused after such a thing and swung his sword and chopped the mercenary's sword into 2 pieces. The mercenary was shocked at what he saw. And then Mito told him that if he surrendered now, they would spare him, and now let him immediately lower his sword. The mercenary asked, he dared to mock him? Raising his sword, he immediately swung at him. But Mito didn't even understand why he did that. But Mito didn't dare kill him, so he gave him a chance at life. He ended up with a wound on his arm. The mercenary, after his first spilled blood, got excited and started laughing at him. But Mito became very angry after deciding to leave him like that and immediately chopped his body with his sword. But the mercenary fell to the ground and started laughing and said there was more to come. Kai told him to have Mito kill him, but Mito replied that he was already beyond help. But Kai said that was not a fact. They should remove any interference if possible. Mito asked, why is he so calm? He's as human as they are, did he forget that? Kai replied that it was a matter of choice. He could kill him now, or he could leave him and wait until he attacked someone else. He's the strongest in his class. Or does he care more about the life of a stranger or the lives of his classmates? Mito listened to the lecture and said he understood. He grabbed the mercenary's body and cut it into 2 more pieces. He ordered the others to help the other students. At this point, Erasure had already taken care of everything and grabbed the last mercenary and said that was it. Erasure decided he wasn't going to let him live and using his fiery fist hit him with all his strength. His servants looked at all this and said he was a ruthless guy. And that's what their Erasure was all about. Rina wasn't left out either, and using her flaming fire decided to burn them down to the last of them. But after a little pause, she asked, why are there so many of them? She looked at her girls and asked what they were doing. Do they know how to fight? Let them start fighting at least one-on-one. The girls were displeased and replied that they were human beings. Rina said that if they didn't kill them, they would kill us. Did they understand? Mireille immediately started to fight the enemies when she heard these words. But suddenly Rina asked them why they had stopped. But suddenly Leonora came out and asked how she should evaluate their training. When the mercenaries saw her, they became even more angry and started shouting that she was a saint. Leonora replied that the hero candidates were under her command, and it is not strange that she helps them at the moment of danger. The mercenary asked, does she want to save them without having more than one night with her? Is she mocking them? Leonora replied that they were just a group of amateurs enchanted by the Demon King's power, and they were not her adversaries. The mercenary got angry and told her to shut her filthy mouth. Immediately, they all came at her at once. But Leonora stayed where she was and looking at them used her fall down. All the mercenaries were trapped at once and fell to the ground without even moving. The mercenary said he couldn't move. And it's not possible, they can't believe it. Rina saw it and said it was like Rin's. But Leonora replied that she wouldn't want them to compare her power to something like that. Strength area, it's her enslavement technique is superior in all aspects. Rina asked her why is she helping them? Leonora replied, didn't she talk about evaluating their training? If possible, she would want them to be able to handle the situation themselves. Rina said that they should thank her then. Leonora replied that there was no need to thank her. Guiding her subordinates is part of her job. The mercenary decided to speak up and told her not to dare ignore them. What would happen to them, he asked. Leonora apologized and replied that she had forgotten that they were still alive. And in that case, would ask her to kill them all. But Leonora decided to act differently, and using her powers she began to control her students. And the girls said that their bodies moved on their own. At the last moment, Rina asked her to stop. But the mercenary was scared too and asked the saint not to do that. But Rina could not resist. And immediately Leonora used her powers and killed the mercenary with another's hands. Kai and Rin were on the roof of the house watching the whole thing. Did Kai say that this was her level 3 enslavement technique? Rin replied that it was many times stronger than her control. She made a whole crowd of people obey at once. The scale and power of this technique is many times greater. Kai looked at her and decided that they needed to figure out how to counter this. Since the Demon King's worshippers attacked, half a day had passed. And all the disciples had gathered in the main hall. But then a girl came up to them and asked how everyone was doing. Rina replied that it was still not good. It was still a big shock to each of them. Ria got angry too and said he wouldn't forgive her. She ruled them like puppets and killed them with their hands. That's not how people act. Rhea asked Rina she was controlling her body too, right? The girl replied that she didn't care about that, but she was annoyed. But not everyone is as resilient as her. Suddenly Mito said it was all his fault. He didn't make it in time. But the students answered him that he had saved them. And you shouldn't blame yourself for everything. Rin said that if they had been faster, it would have ended the same way, Kai said, interrupting her. And now they're no match for Leonora. Kai realized that after he and Mito had defeated the believers, they had split into 2 groups to help as many people as possible. They managed to save a couple of groups, but they didn't get to Nagase's group in time. And the cult of the Demon King, they're still a while away from them, but he killed their leader Rhines, so they're going to go low for a while. And they had better think about other things right now. Kai turned to Rin and asked if they would have a little talk. Rin didn't refuse him and followed him. She asked him what he was up to when he got to a secluded spot. Kai replied that to be able to resist Leonora's enslaving technique, he would need the help of someone with similar strength. That is, her help. Rin said that since that was the case, she didn't see any problem. And what exactly do you need from her? And she wants to try something out. Kai told her that he wanted her to use the control on him first. Hearing those words, Rin was shocked. The day after defeating the Demon King sect, a grand parade was held to celebrate the appearance of the hero candidates. And the battle with the sectarians showed the citizens how strong the candidates are. And thanks to their victory, they were able to win people's hearts. Kai was still thinking, could Leonora have planned all this from the beginning? And if that was indeed the case, she was an extremely dangerous opponent. Stopping in front of the castle, Leonora said that she could see that everyone was gathered. Now she would ask them to return to the temple city of Alpha. Rin asked in surprise, the temple city of Alpha? Kai replied that from the looks of it, it was the city they had been summoned to, and it seemed to be under Leonora's control. Mito asked her if she wasn't coming back with them. Leonora replied that she still had to deal with the aftermath of the recent incident, and Guy would accompany them. Rina said that the dormitory they were returning to had also burned down. The girl also decided to say that apparently it was a popular move. Rina was surprised when she heard the girl interrupt her and speak her mind. Rina walked up to Naomi and asked if she was okay. Naomi apologized and told her not to worry, and she was fine. Leonora heard it too and asked, is something wrong? Suddenly Naomi couldn't stay on her feet and almost fell off. And Rina was there in time to catch her. Rina asked if she was all right. Naomi replied that she was. Leonora said that since it was no big deal, Rina got very angry and wanted to attack the saint. But Naomi told her not to. Leonora said before she left that everything was fine and they would see each other again. All the students were not happy and looked at her with anger. Gaius immediately got down to the task and said that it was time for them to move out. After all, the sooner they left, the sooner they would arrive at their destination. Making a small pass along the way, all the students spread out with each other and started a fire. But some of the students headed into the woods. And Kai just stared into the fire and said it was done. Rin asked if they were really going to do this. Kai replied that Leonora wasn't around and there were only 30 people accompanying them. Compared to the hero candidates, they are weak. It's also the right chance to kill Gaia. And given all the conditions, he has no reason to stop this spectacle. Rhea made Guy go with him into the forest. On the way, Gaius asked, is he sure he's there? He about his dragon-like monster. Rhea replied that he was being completely serious. Sure, it was weird, but he was sure the monster was around here somewhere. Gaius said they were near the road to the capital. If there's a dragon here, a lot of people could get hurt. And we need to report it to the taming party immediately. Suddenly Rhea was surprised and said it was him and pointed his finger. Gaius immediately became alarmed and immediately grabbed his sword. But Gaius was trapped and Erashur used that moment to attack and activated his blast. Rhea stepped aside and said it was dangerous, it could have hit him. But in the end, Gaius was still alive and survived the attack. Erashur said he hit him with all his might and he still didn't die. And it turns out he's not even a bad old man. But Erashur told him he was in foreign territory. So he activated his blast again and aimed it straight at him. And they brought him here. Did he forget that already? And he even knew to set the traps. Guy was completely disheveled and could barely stay on his feet. Erashur said he defended himself with his blessing. But he still got hit pretty hard, didn't he? Gaius replied that a surprise attack was a sign of cowardice. He had a better opinion of him. Erashur asked, so what? He didn't care about methods as long as it would help kill him. The disciples immediately surrounded him from different sides. But Gaius was not confused and decided to act on his own. And Erashur used his influence and told them to press him. And no mercy must be given to him. He must be killed at all costs. Gaius said he had to stop it, and taking a balloon out of his pocket, he threw it straight up into the sky, and then there was a big explosion. Mito saw this and asked, what is this? And then Kai said that Erashur had completely screwed up. The warriors saw the explosion and said it was a distress call. And Mr. Guy hadn't been seen for a long time and it looked like someone had attacked him. But the warrior answered them that it didn't matter anymore and they should run for the signal sooner. But suddenly Kai managed to come first and finished him off. The others were greatly surprised and even a little wary. Kai put his knife in front of his pride and said it was nothing personal, but he had to die. After killing the second of them, the warriors became angry and began to attack. But Kai was quick and dodged easily, and then he left no trace. He killed anyone who got in his way. After killing a few of them, the warrior asked why a hero candidate would do that. Kai walked over and asked if he heard him. At this moment, Gaius was still standing in the middle of the forest and was surrounded by the rest of the disciples. But the students didn't waste any more time and all jumped on him at once, but Gaius stopped them with ease. And Rhea just used his techniques and applied the wind spear. The second student applied a support technique and activated the reinforcement. With one single shot, the guys managed to recreate a large weapon, which Guy was shocked by. Gaius decided not to take any chances and immediately dodged the attack. But immediately another student rushed after his head. But Guy replied to them that it was weak. But Guy was not confused and told him it wouldn't work and applied the blessing of steel. Gaius said they had some uncomfortable blessings. But Erashur was not left out either and immediately launched into his strong and explosive attacks. Gaius was able to resist his power and even defended himself. But in the end he was completely wounded and bleeding. Erashur said he was being kind of stubborn. Rhea also replied that it looks like it was a backup signal after all. He would try to buy time, but Guy said it didn't make sense anymore. And then Leonora came in and said that she could see that he was cornered. Mito also walked up with the rest of the men and asked what was going on here, and turned immediately to Rin. Rin replied that she was only following orders. Mito was surprised and asked, orders? Rina said it was striking. She didn't think he was the type to take orders from others. But Kai came up and apologized to Mito, and he was the one who gave her the order. Mito was surprised and shocked that he gave the order to her. Rin said she had caught somewhere around 7 people, but a few had escaped. Kai replied that she shouldn't worry about that, he'd gotten rid of the rest. Mito was surprised and asked if he got rid of them, and asked him not to say he killed them. Kai replied that yes, he had killed them. These are the last soldiers. Rin said he was ruthless as always. Mito asked him why he did it. Kai replied that Erashur and his vigilantes were busy fighting Gaius. So he decided to take care of the little fellow. Mito said that's why he hasn't seen Erashur anywhere. Rina asked, so they weren't messing around with this riot plan? Kai asked, still having doubts? Those soldiers were already proof enough. Mito asked him, had he joined Erashur? He thought they were on the same side. But Kai replied that he was on his own side and asked Mito if he was sure he was a priority right now. Better to let him go and take care of Erashur instead of fiddling with him. Mito got angry and said they would talk about it again. So he went into the forest to stop Erashur. Leonora showed up unexpectedly and said that she could see that the guys had him cornered. Gaius replied that he was ashamed to admit it, but old age takes its toll. Rhea asked Erishur what they should do next. Erishur replied that they'll do what needs to be done. There is no other choice. Or do they want to run away with their tails between them? The boys were frightened and replied that she could control them, couldn't she? Leonora replied that of course, though there are conditions for that. The stronger the opponent, the weaker the effect of her technique. But with their blessings are mere children compared to its miraculous power. She can control them all at the same time. Erishur said she was a coward, and if he fought them fairly, he would definitely lose. Leonora replied that it was a cheap provocation. But so be it, she would give in. Break their claws. Gaius asked the mistress she wasn't going to use the enslavement technique, was she? He expected that, but he didn't think so. Leonora replied to Guy that she was a saint. God loves her more than he loves them. Erishur said that's great, and immediately set out to attack them both. Gaius decided to protect the queen, but was rebuffed by Leonora. Leonora was fully aware of what she was doing, and using her earth power, she attacked Azar. Then she used the wind technique, and completely covered Erishur with a strong wind. Erishur couldn't do anything against the mistress, and Rhea caught him and didn't let him crash. But Leonora didn't stop there and immediately used the fire technique for the rest of the students. After that, she applied the water technique and immersed one student into the shell. The student didn't expect this and said she couldn't breathe, and asked for someone to save her. Leonora saw that no one was her equal and asked, "Is it over already?" But Erishur said it wasn't over yet. Don't let her think she's won. But then Mito came running in and told Erishur to stop fighting. What was he thinking going to do that? Erishur replied to Mito that if he wants him to stop, let him make him. He's not going to sit around and do nothing like he did. Mito asked, did the others think the same way? Rhea apologized to him and replied that he couldn't trust them. Rina listened to him and said that she agreed with Narumi. Since it was starting, why didn't they just join in? Miri told Renee she's going back there. Not everything is decided by brute force. Leonora heard them all and asked, a split in the group and so quickly? There's not even a riot going on. They can't just walk away and pretend it never happened, can they? Leonora did not play with them anymore and used her fierce wind against them. But Rhea was determined and immediately wanted to repel her attack. He tried to stop her, but he couldn't. All the students were trapped in the wind and couldn't do anything. But Mito was a little smarter and came down to earth. Seeing that all his boys were injured, he asked them how they were feeling. Erishur answered him not to panic, and he can't protect them all, it's time to make a decision. At this rate, she's gonna take them all down. Mito replied that there was no way out anymore. Suddenly, Rina looked at him and said that it had gotten to him, because her patience was already at its limit. And immediately she showed her fire in her hands and was ready to attack. Mireille also said she didn't really want to be a part of it, but what can you do? Leonora stood in front of them and said that she was about to remind them why she was so valuable. Rin also asked what they would do now. Kai replied that the real fun would begin when she used the enslavement technique. Until then, they'll leave all the dirty work to them and wait for a time when it's better for them to join. Suddenly, Guy said to Mrs. Leonora that even though he was of little use, he wished to speak first. Leonora replied that she was relying on him, and that should help his wounds. And immediately she healed his wounds. After healing Gaia, he became his old self and even regained his arm, which had been cut after the explosion. Ria got angry and said that they had used up so much energy on him. Rina also said that they had more strength too, and now they were all fighting together. Leonora told him to let them start whenever they wished. After all, this battle would be a great test for them. And naturally, if they can't defeat them, they can't become heroes. Mito headed out to attack himself and ordered his guys to cover him. As the blows collided, Mito applied more strength and began to destroy his opponent's sword with his attack. Gaius, seeing that his sword was about to break, he stepped back a distance to avoid being left entirely without his sword. Gaius realized that simply blocking his attacks would not work. Leonora noticed this and turning to the ice told them to take a new shape and pierced his target. She made some ice with sharp limbs out of ice and pointed them directly at Mito. Rina saw this and shouted that she would melt it. But Leonora asked her, could she do it again? She used the same ice attack again. But Mito had already managed to cut them all. But one hit his face and wounded him. Mireille got angry too and using the power of the stone asked her what she was doing with their leader and activated her telekinesis. And Rhea used wind manipulation and activated it and used the wind torch, directing a unified attack with her. But Leonora just stood still and at the last moment used her powers and shut down the guy's powers. Leonora said she was God's favorite, and witchcraft and blessings don't work on her. Kai at this point looked at everything behind the stone and thought about the blessing of the saint. Opening his eye, he saw her defense stats were low, but she didn't really need them. And the physical attack should work, but Gaius protects her from that. Arashir wasn't left out either and immediately attacked the old man. Gaius stopped him and said that a simple leg kick without an explosion was out. Arashir replied that he could do it without it. Arashir got very angry and told Mito that the old man would only stay on him and let him deal with that girl. Mito thought that if her blessings didn't work on her, then his sword wouldn't help either. Suddenly, a student ran up and gave him the sword and told him to try this one. Mito took the sword in his other hand and thanked the guy for the fitting. But Leonora said he was a sight to behold. And finally got the resolve to fight. Mito replied that someone had set his mind right and threatened Leonora that he would behead her. Leonora saw that the guy was serious and immediately attacked. But Mito stopped and repelled her attacks. Rina said that until her blessings work on her, they are no help there. Ria replied that they couldn't help Arashir either, they were fighting close to each other, he'd get hit too. Mirai said they'd only have to watch. And they'd only get in the way. After watching the entire battle, Arashir kept up with the old man and tried to destroy him as promised. But suddenly in the moment, Guy got distracted and was a bit surprised. And Arashir took advantage of that moment and made a strong attack. After that, Arashir started laughing and asked, "What's wrong? Why is the old man slowing down?" His wounds may have been healed, but his strength had not increased. Gaius replied that he had said someone who was no longer able to use the blessing. Leonora used a fire attack at that moment. But Mito dodged them and didn't get hit by the fire. He knew it was useless. At this rate, she'd swat him before he could get close enough. And suddenly his eyes were a different color and he knew there had to be another way to overpower Leonora. Leonora said he expected nothing less from him. Only a few could dodge her technique so deftly. Mito realized that until he got closer to her, it would be a one-way game. What should he do? Try to get closer or find a way to attack from a distance? Rina saw that the blessings don't work on her, so on Rina or the others here won't help. And Leonora specializes in ranged attacks. And now Mito realized that he had to reduce the distance between them at all costs. And he had to act as quickly as possible. Leonora didn't get any more cool and used the power of the wind on him. But Mito decided to go ahead and tried to get closer to her. But Leonora saw him approaching her and applied a dive. Mito was surprised in the moment and didn't even know what it was. Leonora used the fire technique and used immersion to move it directly into Mito's body. Leonora realized that all this time he had been unconsciously strengthening his body with magic, and then he was able to release all the power at once. And that's an incredible talent. But however, he was still not her equal. Arashir was still fighting with the old man at this moment. Arashir realized that there was no way to use the explosion anymore. How could he defeat him then? Gaius attacked him and said he could see the doubt on his face. With a wave of his sword, he slashed Arashi's chest. Arashir was surprised and didn't realize what was wrong with him. After all, he was losing to a half-dead old man. Gaius asked, "Is that all he can do without his blessing? He is an amateur after all." But Arashir realized that he wasn't. And he is strong enough without his explosions. And immediately walked over to him and looked into the old man's eyes. Guy was shocked and asked with surprise, "Can he still stand?" Arashir used all his strength and immediately punched him with his fist. Guy couldn't even do anything against this guy, and was badly wounded in the head. Arashir said he'd won the bloody old man, and Streak's sword was still hanging from his body. Mito also realized that it wouldn't work that way, and he has to protect everyone. And he doesn't want to watch his friends suffer. Leonora said he was surprisingly resilient. Mito didn't talk long and said he was on his way to her. Leonora replied that no matter how hard he tried to get closer to her, Mito was even stronger and immediately stood in front of her. Leonora was shocked by all this and didn't expect such a turn. Mito saw it and attacked, but the girl just stepped back and missed. But still Mito managed to hurt her. Leonora saw that her arm was wounded and asked if he was happy about it. And now she realizes she's let her guard down. But no, that was definitely not the case. But Mito didn't stay away and tried to approach her again. Leonora was confused and sensing his arrival. She used an ice attack, but Mito didn't even feel her attack and simply shattered the ice into small pieces. Leonora realized and couldn't believe it because she was acting cautiously. And it was just that Mito was too fast to keep track of him. Leonora asked, "A blessing of speed? Since the god gifted him with the power he wanted, it means he loves him too." But Mito replied that he was just asking for the power to help him protect his loved ones. And activated the speed. And immediately he was in front of her and put his sword right in front of her face. Leonora said it still wasn't enough. Leonora immediately applied the fall-down technique. Mito was greatly surprised and fell to the ground, unable to move. Leonora said she didn't want to use it, but it looks like there's no choice. Kai saw her pull out her trump card and told Rin that it was time for them to start. Leonora said she didn't expect to have to use the enslavement technique, and even Mito is living up to her expectations. and that's pretty sweet. The guy couldn't even move and tried to resist. Rina was worried about him that she even started running to help him. But Leonora saw this and told them to stop. She wouldn't allow them to approach them and stop them with magic as well. Ray got caught up in the crush too and said he couldn't move either. Leonora replied that they all did a great job, and they will consider that they passed that test. And though Gaius's defeat, he did not foresee that there is always another night. And any problem is solvable as long as the hero candidates are under her control. Ria said, meaning they went into the fight from the beginning with no chance of winning. Mito realized that until they found a way to deal with this technique, they wouldn't succeed. Leonora said they allowed the ritual of summoning hero candidates because she can control them. Otherwise, their existence could be a threat to the country, don't they think so? But suddenly Kai used his knives and attacked Leonora with them. But she sensed it and summoned the earth to repel the attack. Leonora said she kept wondering where he was lurking. Her sweet servants died because of him. Kai said he was surprised too, and a simple guy like him was honored by their attention. Leonora said that he seemed strange to him from the beginning. Even after receiving a useless blessing, he didn't react in any way. It was hard to call him an amateur, and frankly, she's disappointed. And someone like him should have thought twice before getting into a losing battle. Kai replied that whether he was a loser or not was up to him. Leonora told him to try to prove otherwise, and immediately used the same magic and told him to freeze. Kai looked and replied that he understood everything and asked if this was his enslavement technique. Leonora asked, now it's gotten to him? And as long as this technique has existed. But suddenly a shot rang out and the bullet hit her arm. Kai asked, did she cover the vital points right away? He didn't expect anything less from her. Leonora was shocked and asked why he could move. She had used the enslavement technique on him. Kai didn't stop there and immediately fired another shot and hit him right in the stomach. Leonora asked what kind of weapon was that, and realized that her defenses weren't keeping up with it. Kai replied, one of the deadliest weapons from their world. He didn't have much ammunition left, so he tried not to use it often. Leonora kept repeating to herself to keep them calm. And she doesn't even know why her technique doesn't work on him, but that's not what's important right now. Kai picked up on the fact that she was using fire and heard Leonora order it to burn. Leonora rejoiced afterward and said that he had let his guard down. But when she opened her eyes, she saw that there was only the cloak. But Kai was already behind her and holding a gun to her head told her not to move. And he realized from her fight with Mito that she wasn't strong in close-range combat. And the technique she relied on so much didn't work on him. Leonora realized she was screwed and asked the guy why. How could it not have worked? Kai said that he really wondered why, but he wasn't really sure if his gamble would work or not. But it had worked out just fine. Earlier, Kai had told Rin to use control on him first. But Rin was scared and didn't want to do it. But Rin said she wasn't into that kind of thing. Kai asked her what she was even talking about. He researched the materials about the techniques. He found no information on enslavement techniques, but instead he got some very interesting facts. And if two techniques of the subjugating type are imposed on one person, then the technique that was imposed first has priority. Would there really be no effect from the enslavement technique if she was the first to impose control on him? Kai replied that it was possible. Also, something like that could be pulled off if her technique exceeded her divine defense. Rin asked him, is he serious? But after all, her powers wouldn't compare to her enslavement technique in terms of scale or power. Kai replied that he thought the main difference was the level of the techniques. And he saw that Rin's control is at level 1, and the control enslavement technique is at level 3. Rin said that means even if she casts control on him first, she can interrupt the spell? Kai replied that no, that was unlikely. Steady submission technique had taken over her control as well. Back then, he thought that they had obeyed him because his technique was higher in level, but that wasn't the case, and he simply applied the technique first. And it's likely that the technique to enslave Leonora works along the same lines. And anyway, all they have to do is try it out. And first, they need to find out the range of the control. Leonora got really upset and asked, really, Rin? Kai asked, wondering if she had finally gotten it. Rin's control is on it now. Leonora responded by saying she's a sassy wannabe, but Kai said that was the end of it. He grabbed the gun with his hand and decided to shoot her right in the head. But Kai changed his mind about killing her and handcuffed her, and she felt her power being blocked by those handcuffs. Kai said that he borrowed a pair of handcuffs from the members of the Demon King sect, and it looks like they're blocking her miraculous power too. Leonora asked him what he was going to do to her. Kai replied that he would look at it now, and if she could get them all back to their world now, then he would set her free. But Leonora said that, unfortunately, that's impossible. She can only summon heroes here, and to send them back would require a completely different technique. Kai looked and saw that it didn't look like a lie. Nor did she have that skill in her status. He asked, then why did she tell them that if they defeated the Demon King, she could return home? Leonora replied that summoning people from the other world required enormous amounts of miraculous power. They appealed to the god himself to help carry them here. And in other words, their being here is God's will. And when they use their role, they will most likely be brought back. She doesn't fully believe it herself, does she? Leonora answered that was correct. She had summoned hero candidates before them, but none of them had been able to even come close to the Demon King. Kai said he guessed the answer, but would ask what became of the candidates who were called before them. Leonora replied that almost everyone had been killed by the Demon King's army, and there might have been survivors, but he didn't know where they were hiding. Kai said anyone would give up after that, and that's why she didn't tell them. Leonora asked him that now he wanted to settle here permanently. Sooner or later the Demon King's army would attack and they would have to take the fight. Kai replied that ultimately they have no choice, right? Leonora said that's correct. And if he wants to survive the battle, they need the support of the country, isn't she right? She would turn a blind eye to the incident. Just let her go. But Kai raised the knife and told her to die. But Mito came over and told her to make him stop. Kai asked him why he was stopping him. It seemed to him that he had already decided to cross the line. Had the naive thoughts not yet been completely beaten out of him? Mito replied that he had agreed to help because he believed that Leonora knew how to get them home instantly. And since that's not possible, he'd rather keep his status as a hero candidate. Kai said they already had a riot. Did he forget? Leonora also joins the conversation and says that Mito is saying the right thing. She admits that she got a little carried away, and they can imagine that none of this happened. Kai knew there was a logic to it, but she was too dangerous. There was no way to take her by surprise a second time. And really, all she wants to do is kill Rin. And maybe once they free Leonora, she'll attack Rin right away. Mito says they will not get away with killing a saint. They would take Leonora's oath that she would treat them better from now on and set her free. Mireille also replied that she agreed. Not all of them know how to fight. And if they become criminals, then defeating them with the Demon King would only be a dream. Rina said she's in, too, and she thinks they'll find a way to make her keep her promise. Rhea replied that no, he's on Kai's side. He doesn't trust her, she's almost killed them already, what's to stop her from finishing what she started? Mito replied that, frankly, he agreed with him. But if they killed her, they wouldn't stand a chance. Kai realized that Mito's concern was understandable. The safety of the entire class was important to him. And on his own he would be able to survive, but one must not act rashly. But suddenly Kai looked closely and saw that this was it. He pulled the trigger without thinking and shot her in the head. Everyone was shocked and didn't expect him to shoot her. Mito got angry after that and shouted at him. Kai didn't talk to him further and let off a smoke grenade and said goodbye to Mito. Mireille said he killed her before they even came to a mutual decision, inexcusable. Rina said the same thing, that he was only thinking of himself as always. Rhea thought too, did Kai really do it? Rin walked over to the body as well and couldn't believe that he had actually killed her. Everything had happened just as Kai had said it would. Kai had told her that he would tell her what happens next. And their main goal is to capture Leonora and find out from her how they can return to their world. And if it's found out that she's incapable of it, he'll kill her. Rin replied that she understood. However, even if it turns out that it's not so easy to return to their world, Mito will still protect Leonora, at which point he will kill her and run away. Rin asked, does he really want to take all the blame for killing the saint? Kai replied that it was for that very purpose that he had allowed some soldiers to escape. And so they would create the vision that he alone had started the riot. And if he was the only one considered a criminal, they would be able to return to the country without any problems. Rin asked, but would everything go so smoothly? Kai replied that this was where her powers would come in handy. If something went wrong, let her use her control to make sure the negotiations with the country went smoothly. Rin asked, then what would he do? Kai replied that he would be fine on his own. There was no need to worry about him. Rin stayed with the rest of the guys and looked up into the sky to see that it had changed color. But the head of demons asked the candidates for heroes wanderers from another world, blessed by the god. The servant replied that yes. They made several attempts to eliminate them, but they all failed. The head said not to worry about it. In the end, their actions in enemy territory were limited. And even if they left them alone, they would show themselves sooner or later. And war with humanity, he thought they'd easily trample them. But this is much more interesting. Kai said goodbye to the boys and went into the forest alone. He began to survive in the way he only knows how. Kai said he was on his second day of walking, and judging by the map, there should be a town nearby. When he saw a mountain in front of him, he thought he could climb higher. As he climbed the mountain, he saw a city in the distance. It was about half a day's journey away. But Kai decided he would head into town. Kai looked around and didn't get there until nightfall, but that's even better for him. and he doesn't think the Saint's killer will be allowed through the main gate. But who knows what they would do to him? And then Kai decided to throw a hook and climb over the wall. Kai climbed the wall and realized that the first thing he needed to do was to get some money. But he remembered that he had borrowed a little from the dead soldiers earlier, but it wouldn't be enough for long. Suddenly, on the way out, he saw that another bar was open. And there was no better place to gather information. Upon entering the bar, the chief met him and asked him what he would be ordering. Kai set down his backpack and answered that he would like an ale and something to eat. The drunk who was sitting next to him said he'd never seen him here before. Kai answered that he had to flee his hometown. Now he is looking for a way to earn a living. Did his town happen to be attacked by the Demon King's army? They're a real disaster. Kai realized that he had made up his own story and it had worked out well. He said that maybe the alcoholic himself, he knew where undocumented refugees are hired here. The chief replied that at this rate he should be an adventurer. Kai asked with surprise, adventurers? And what do they do for a living? The chief replied that the regular guild issues him various issues. The most common is destroying monsters. The alky also said it's not a job for slackers. He ain't gonna get killed? And he could tell right away that the kid's no pushover. The alky asked, the guy in charge guessed? Although he's traveling alone, so it's not surprising. Kai replied that he could kill the monster. Kai asked, and how does he become an adventurer? The chief replied that it was easy. All you have to do is register at the guild in the center of town. They are always short of free hands there, and they are not picky about the documents. Kai looked at it and said that the person in charge knew a lot. The chief replied that he used to be an adventurer himself, but he had been shot in the knee and that was the end of his road of adventure. Suddenly he brought him food. In the morning, Kai opened his eyes and saw that it was dawn. Kai went downstairs and thanked the girl for letting him stay the night. And he thought he would stay here for a while longer. The girl smiled back at him and thanked him in return for choosing them. Kai headed into town and he noticed that even seeing his face, she didn't react in any way. And photography hasn't been invented yet. And he thinks there's no point in being overly cautious. But Kai saw the flag on the house and saw that's where he needed to go. And that is the Adventurers Guild. As he opened the doors, he saw that the place had many visitors and everyone knew each other. Kai looked around and saw that there was a registration desk to that side. When he approached, he said he wanted to register as an adventurer. The girl replied okay and said that the registration fee was 1 silver coin. And would the gentleman be satisfied with that? Kai gave the token to her and answered that he did. The girl gave him the paper and told him to give his name, age, and origin. Kai immediately realized that he shouldn't tell them his real name. So he told them his name was Siren and he was 17 years old. And his hometown had been destroyed by the Demon King's army. The girl said that was enough information to register. Kai remembered that Siren was his code name from his world. He didn't expect it to be useful here. Kai did everything and thanked her for her help. The girl stamped the seal and said that his registration was complete. And now she will briefly tell him about the activities of adventurers. And each adventurer is assigned a different rank according to their accomplishments and abilities. And the higher the rank, the higher the reward. But the queries themselves will be more difficult. And since he's a rookie, that's why he's rank F. Let him complete the requests, earn reputation, and he can increase his rank. And on this board there are queries posted for adventurers. And advises him to look for requests for F rank. Kai walked over to the board and saw that the F rank requests were mostly gathering medicinal herbs and killing kobolds. Kai realized that he hadn't seen kobold monsters before. And maybe this is a request and take it, he thought. Suddenly a guy came up to him and said he hadn't seen him here before. Does he really want to fight kobolds? And they'd kill a dead guy like him in no time. Kai looked and thought, what kind of assholes are these? But Kai had made up his mind and told them he was giving them advice to turn around and leave without making too much noise. The guy with the yellow hair asked, did he decide to give them advice? The other workers saw the Sora and said they were at it again. And they're harassing the new guy? It's gonna be tough on him. The guy said he was watching, that no one had taught him manners. So he decided to teach the guy manners and tried to hit him. But Kai had spotted it beforehand and grabbed his fist before he touched it. The guy got angry and asked him to let go of his hand. And asked him what was wrong with him. And ordered the boys to teach him some sense. The boys heard the order of their chief and all at once they swooped down and tried to grab him. But after that, Kai didn't play with them for long and knocked every single one of them out. Kai didn't say anything else, and as he walked away he couldn't believe that these were mid-level adventurers. And they were many times weaker than any hero candidate. Upon entering the city, he immediately decided that it was time for him to fulfill the request. So he went straight to the forest. He figured that if the information from the query was to be believed, the kobold base should be around here somewhere. Suddenly, he saw that there were monster footprints on the ground. And they were very fresh. He looked and realized they were leading him this way. And if you look closely, they look like animal tracks. But he was getting a little curious as to what those other tracks were. And he noticed that they were very good at hiding their presence. And maybe they are kobolds. But suddenly he felt someone standing behind him, and he smelled like a wet dog. The monster immediately attacked him with his sword, but Kai dodged its blow and stepped aside. Kai saw the sword in his hands and realized that he had taken it from the men. But another one ran up and attacked, but Kai was faster and immediately dodged it. When he saw the dirt under him, he threw it right into the monster's face. But it turned out to be much more complicated because the monsters surrounded him from different sides and began to attack one after another. But Kai decided not to let them all live, and taking away the monster's weapons, began to slash each one. But in a moment, one of the monsters was greatly surprised by his abilities, but Kai turned around and threw 3 knives at him and didn't leave him a chance. After finishing off all the monsters, he felt that the assessment had activated, and saw that finishing off such a monster wouldn't be any difficulty, and maybe even a couple more kills to make money. Arriving back at the clan, he set all the loot in front of her. Kai told her that he had brought their ears as proof that the kobolds had been killed. Would that be enough, he asked. The girl answered that he did, and he gathered so many and single-handedly killed them all. Kai didn't hold back and answered that yes. They were harder to find than to kill. In truth, Kai realized that his combat skills were sufficient, but his exploration of the territory was suffering. The girl asked the guy, did the kobolds give him any trouble? Perhaps he had already registered with other branches of their guild? And hadn't he been assigned a C rank? Kai replied that no, he was new at this. The girl was surprised that he was new and stood up and said that she understood and asked him to wait a bit while they prepared his reward. In the evening, Kai held his hard-earned money in his hands and was so excited about it that he even threw it in the air and caught it. He realized that even on such squishy monsters, one could make a fortune. Anyway, he would need the money in the future, and he can settle here as an adventurer for the time being. And if he connects with other adventurers, he can get useful information from them. Suddenly a man suddenly stood in front of him and said hello to him. Kai asked the stranger if he had something to do with him. I knew this one would be stronger than the guys in the guild. The man replied that his name was Lyle and he was a rank B adventurer, and he deals with the internal problems of all the adventurers in this town. Kai asked, so what of it? Lyle tells the guy that he turns out to be even stronger and asks if he's right. And he's the guy who beat up his guys, he's right about that, right? Kai answered him that they were the first to start. But Lyle said that was a lie. They told him he was the one who attacked the bottom. Kai replied that since that was the case, he had nothing more to say. Lyle jumped on him and shouted at him to stop talking, and he'd have him to answer for everything. At Lyle's first strike, he immediately crouched down and dodged, while the others just stood back and watched him flail his arms. Lyle didn't give up and shouted that this wasn't over. So he decided to land a single blow with his foot. But Kai was faster than him and gave a hard kick to his legs, knocking him to the ground. Kai told the guy he was fast, but apparently self-taught. And the technique is too obvious and lots of open places to attack. Lyle immediately got to his feet and went to attack again, but with his fists. Kai just grabbed his arm and pinned him to the ground. Kai told him that he was obviously not used to fighting humans. But he understood that he was a monster hunter, so that was already clear. Lyle got angry and told him that if he was so strong, why attack those weaker than him? Kai replied that it was a misunderstanding, and he could explain to him how it was. Lyle listened and said that he apologized and that he was wrong. Lyle thought about it and said that meant they'd lied to him, and it was his own fault for not checking, and left them all the signs that they'd been beaten. Lyle told the boys to think about their behavior. The boys all replied together that they were sorry. The guy told them not to apologize to him, but to Kyle. The guys started bowing and apologizing again. Kai said that since they had resolved everything, they could forget about it. He had a couple of questions for him. Lyle replied that he was guilty before him, so he can ask whatever he wants. Kai replied that he was a traveler, and became an adventurer to save up money for the journey. But there's another reason for him. Lyle said he had the strength. It's not about finding a companion, so what is it? Kai replied that he was looking for a way to move to another world. Lyle was surprised and asked, traveling to another world? The guys also asked, is that possible? But the hero candidates are from another world, right? Kai replied that that was correct and he needed to go back to where they came from. Lyle said that means you need a technique, but they're not masters at it. Kai replied that he realized it wasn't easy to find out about such a thing, but he could use any clue he could get. Lyle said that if he needed a knowledgeable person, maybe the sage Elbin could help him? Kai asked with surprise, a sage? Lyle asked, doesn't he know about him? He is an elf and an advisor to the king. Kai replied that he had heard of him once and asked if he was real, and he remembered that it was written about him in the books. Elves are long-lived people who live deep in the forest. They are so few in number that they have become almost legendary, but sometimes they can be found in villages. And the sage is one of them. Lal said he's over 100 years old, so he knows a lot. Yeah, and he's known as a talented magician. Kai realized that elves were unique in that they borrowed the powers of spirits to use magic. Even if he didn't know about the return technique, and his magic could bring him back. The boy came up and asked if the sage was still alive. I haven't heard a word from him. Had anyone seen him at all? Lyle replied that he didn't know any more than he did. He apologized for not being more helpful. Kai said that no, it was useful information, and now it's late outside and apologizes to him for leaving them, but he'll go to his room. Lal got curious and asked if he could ask a question too. Why would he need this path to another world? Kai replied, so they could only try to guess. And turned around and started to walk away. The next day he came to the girl again and brought the rewards. And in return she said that here was his reward for the order. And the Lord had done a very good job. Kai realized that it had been a week already. He had accumulated enough. Lal met him and asked if he was done yet. And would he like to have a drink with them? Kai apologized and replied that he didn't have time for that today. Lal thought that he must be tired and wished that they would see each other soon. Walking out into the city, Kai looked at the sheet and saw that he had gathered information about a wise man. And that man's name was Elbenkellet. Until 10 years ago he was an advisor to the king, but he retired and moved to the western frontier. And it seems to him it's near a hot spot where the fight against the Demon King's army is being fought. There's no reason to stay here anymore. And it's time to visit the wise man. At this time in Alpha Temple City, at the negotiation table, Squad 8 Commander Henry was saying that it had been about a month since he had started looking out for hero candidates to replace the deceased saint. And maybe they have some complaints? Mito replied that no, not even the opposite. They all think they are very kind to them. Henry said that in that case he was glad. Each of them is a valuable fighting unit of their country. And he wants them to be shown the respect they deserve. Mireille also replied that she thanked him for his concern. And in her head she realized that he was nothing like Leonora, though that one was a little suspicious. Henry did not linger long and said that now he could move on to the main topic, and in truth, it had been decided at yesterday's meeting that it was time for the hero candidates to show themselves in action. Mito asked, in other words, they want to send them to the front lines. Is he understanding correctly? Henry replied that it was like this. There is still fighting along the western border to this day, and they would be sent to one of the hot spots on the front line. Mito said it was understandable. But regarding their agreement, Heinrich asked, is he about protecting those without combat skills? Well, he'll look into it for sure. Mito rejoiced and thanked him. But Heinrich said they would assign them a different job. They don't have many resources to provide for those who don't work. Mito said yes and thinks they will even be happy about it. Mireille asked him when they were moving out. Henry replies that they are in a hurry, so they are leaving tomorrow morning. He asked them to tell the others to start preparing. Mireille left saying that it was very good that they had accepted their terms. Mito replied that it was right. It's embarrassing how smoothly everything is going. Mireille said she believes after Leonora's death they don't have any trump cards left to control them. So they're making concessions. Mito replied that they had killed Leonora too. Naturally, they are afraid of them, but Mireille at the moment was only wondering where he had really gone and what he was doing. Mito remembered that after Leonora's murder and Kaya's disappearance, they had come to the king and told him that the saint had been murdered. The king asked how could she have been killed? Who could have done such a thing? Rena replied that Kai was the killer. He's as much a candidate for hero as they are. The guards were surprised and asked, what? How is this possible? The king also asked, and where's he? Rena replied that he had escaped. What else is a traitor to do but make a quick getaway from the scene of the crime? The guard also said that if it was true, they needed to organize a search party immediately. And first we need to see if the saint is really dead. The king asked the boys, did they let him escape? It's a very convenient story for them. Aracey got angry and asked him what he had said there. The king replied that he himself did not want to suspect them, but they can't rule out the possibility that they all conspired and killed Leonora. But the guard replied to the bishop that no, he had seen it all himself. These brave hero candidates were trying to protect a saint, but they failed to stop Rin, and the saint died at his hands. He saw it for himself. The bishop thought and said that he could trust the words of Leonora's soldiers. Is this Kai really that strong? Mito replied that he was very strong, and secretive enough not to show it to anyone. The bishop made up his mind and said they would discuss the details in the inner room, and he asked them to come with him. Rin listened to their conversation and saw that the control worked well. Mito thanked her for such a favor, and it looked like they had somehow gotten past that stage. Mireille asked him, is he still worried about Kai? He's not worth his worries. Mito replied that he might be. He knew that what Kai had done was his fault, and he was supposed to protect them all. Meeting with the rest of the students, he said that it had been decided to send them to the front lines. The battle group begins to assemble. The disciple asked a real fight what to do, and they got kind of uncomfortable and very scared. Rina asked only now it was they who were starting to be afraid? Hadn't they decided to join the battle group themselves? The boys answered him that that was correct. The girl was also frightened and asked they wouldn't be sent there alone. Mito replied that yes. Henry, their commander, is also in charge of the 8th squad of knights, and it looks like they will be part of that squad. Rin immediately came out and asked him, what about Kai? Mito replied that there was a bounty on his head, and it looks like all available resources are being spent on finding him, but still no leads. Rin got upset and started to walk away, but Mito asked him, so she didn't tell him that she was worried about this traitor. And Rina said that if she found him, she would burn him to the ground. But Rin was very sad and looked up at the sky and wished she could go with him. The next day, the students were on their way to the front line on horseback. Suddenly, Rina said that she was tired and asked if it would be soon to take a break. Minera replied that they had recently stopped for lunch. Now they would go on until nightfall. And the guy was saying that for the last few days, all they've been doing is walking. And he was getting pretty tired. And he wished they had a car. Suddenly, Arasi raised his hand and told everyone to stop. The boys were surprised and asked him what was wrong. Arashir replied that there were monsters in the bushes. Everyone immediately got ready, but a warrior came up to them and asked why they had stopped. Mito apologized and replied that he thought there was a group of monsters hiding nearby. The warrior asked, and where are they? There is no one here. And even if they are, they've been given a clear order. And they must not stop without authorization. Arashir got angry after his rude words and grabbed him by the throat and lifted him into the air and even threw him off his horse. Mito told him to stop. Arashir asked why would he listen to a little brat like him. Suddenly, all of a sudden, monsters came out of the forest and were ready to attack them. But Arashir sensed them and let him go and then switched to them. The guards said they're rabbit claws and have everyone prepared to attack immediately. But the monsters didn't stand still and immediately started jumping straight at the warriors and disciples. Their claws were so sharp that they easily knocked the swords out of the warriors' hands and looked at them as if they were prey. Arashir was ready to play around a bit and immediately activated his blast and burned the rabbits alive. After finishing off one of them, he stepped his heavy foot on its head and crushed the last of it. The guard thanked the apprentice for saving him. But Arashir replied to get out of his way and stay out of the way. Arashir then emerged from his hole of a calm man and proceeded to his new warrior with fiery hands. He didn't stop at one of them and unleashed his fiery fists and proceeded to fight the monsters. The guys saw it and were shocked. And lately her outbursts have only gotten stronger. Arashir had finished everyone off and saw that it wasn't enough. And this way he couldn't get to the bastard. That night he saw Kai holding Leonora at gunpoint and didn't want him to kill her. But after Kai put a bullet in his head, he was very angry with him and wished him dead. And he realized that this Kai had been strange from the beginning. And even when he looked at him, he didn't raise an eyebrow. And he didn't give a rat's ass about bullshit. And he was clearly not a weakling. And when he got the power of the blast, he seemed to be able to top it. And now it's really pissing him off. Mito asked him what's wrong with him. He's been in a bad mood lately. Arashir replied that it was nothing. He doesn't like it when little things tell him what to do. At this time, on the western border of the sacred country of Digrest, in the city of Fort Traz, warriors were alert and guarding their city. Suddenly, the commander of Squad 4 of the Order of Holy Knights, Amelia, came up to them saying that she was grateful to them for having the hero candidates come to them. Amelia introduced herself and said that this was the western border of the sacred country. In other words, she was the frontline commander, although she had only recently received that title. Heinrich asked what had happened to Commander Bankin. Amelia replied that he had died a week ago and wished he could tell them to rest after their long journey. But suddenly, the gates opened and warriors shouted that the Demon King's army was attacking. The Demon King's army is attacking. Amelia said that as they have heard, they have no time to rest. And she hopes they will help them. Mito replied that they all understood the order. He turned to the others and said it was time to prepare for battle. Arashir was even more excited when he heard his words about the fight, and he thought it was great. He needed to release all the negativity that had built up inside him. The Demon King's army was so large and strong that everyone pounced on the kingdom at once. The disciples looked at them and asked how many were there, but Henry told them to attack and reduce their numbers before they could get close to the fort. The warriors prepared their bows to shoot the monsters. And the warriors of fire heeded his will and burned the evil demons. Attacking all together, they aimed arrows at the demons and then burned them with flames. But the demons were also bloodthirsty and shouted that they needed to kill all humans. Mito was also surprised and said that they didn't even try to retreat after something like that. But Amelia said it wouldn't kill them. And don't underestimate the strength and endurance of demons. And what might work against humans won't work against them. Mito asked what should they do? Amelia replied for them to follow Henry's instructions. He is leading the raid. And she will be in charge of Squad 4. And they will meet the demons downstairs. Henry said she could rely on him. And he wanted to say so, but as he sees, someone is itching to join the fray. Suddenly Rina said that they went downstairs first. Mito was surprised and asked how so, but suddenly Erasure made his move and with one blow he burned almost all of the monsters. But he wasn't alone and took the rest of the guys with him. The demon was screaming that they were idiots. And he couldn't believe they'd come out of their booths by themselves. Erasure said they were demons or whatever, but he didn't care anymore. Let them all come over here. Maybe they'll entertain him a little. What the demons did was to destroy the gates and break into the kingdom. The guards were shocked and realized they were no match for them. The demons didn't take pity on them and capture them, and even worse started killing every single person. But suddenly one demon saw the man and attacked him with his axe. The guard had already said goodbye to his life, but suddenly he opened his eyes and saw that the demon was already lying dead. The guard, seeing that the hero candidate had saved him, was shocked. Mito made sure they were all exterminated and never attacked again. Seeing that the others weren't leaving, he commanded the sword to stretch, and immediately began slaying the demons. Mito rejoiced greatly, for he had succeeded, and his strength continued to grow. Mito told his boys, "Do they see that they have the power to overpower them? And they should not be afraid to challenge them." The disciples rejoiced greatly and immediately rushed to attack and fight the demons. Mito, too, broke into the crowd of demons and realized that he could not hesitate. If he was afraid, they would be afraid too. After all, he's the leader of the class. But he realized that you can't rely on naive thoughts. Mireille also said that they wouldn't abandon him. She immediately activated her telekinesis, and Rina used her flame and directed the fire directly at the demons. Rin also joined their team and used a control technique, and directing it at the demon stopped it. The guards looked at all of this and said that this was the strength of the hero candidates. They are crowding the Demon King's army. Henry said to keep the hero candidates going, and they will make the demons retreat. After a while, all the disciples were already at their limit, but there were no demons left on the battlefield either. Amelia looked and raised her sword and shouted that the Demon King's army had retreated, and victory remains theirs. In the evening at dawn, Henry came up and asked Mito what he thought. How did he feel about his first fight? Mito replied that there was still a lot to work on. Fighting with a crowd is still difficult for him. During the fight, he focuses all his attention on his opponents and sometimes forgets to give commands. Heinrich told him that he had done well. They certainly wouldn't have won today without him. This time, they only fought middle and lower class demons. And the higher demons, though few in number, are terrifyingly powerful. Mito listened to his words and replied that he would take them into consideration. In the evening, the remaining demons returned to the headquarters and told all said that the report is over, and apologized to the king for not doing their duty. The commander of the Demon King's army was very unhappy with his news. At this time, in the west of the sacred country of Digrest in the Great Forest, Kai was already in the forest and still continuing his journey. He thought it looked like the exit from the forest was very close. It would not be far to the great sage's house. But suddenly he felt someone following him and immediately he was attacked. But Kai dodged it and even looked to see what it was. He noticed that its attack was fast and it looked like a tongue. Looking closer, he saw that they were monkey monsters. Kai applied his eye and activated the assessment. When he opened the characterization, he saw that they were called gibbons. Kai tossed the bag aside and decided that was enough for now. Gibbons saw that the boy had prepared to attack them and immediately lost his temper and attacked with his tongue. Kai sharply dodged his attack, but looking in front of him, he saw that Gibbon was already in front of him. Without thinking for long, he immediately jumped into the air to avoid being caught by the monsters. But the Gibbons didn't leave him alone either and immediately started attacking. But Kai used his knife and cut his tongue. Kai didn't stop there and immediately ran to kill the monster, and told him he was slow. After finishing off one of them, Gibbon couldn't even fend off the blow and bid farewell with his life. The rest of the Gibbons stopped in place after seeing their ally dead. Kai asked them what were they frozen. Should he approach them himself? But it ended badly for them and the guy finished them all off. Leaving behind dead bodies, he thought, each time more and more dangerous monsters are caught. And that was because he was approaching the Demon King's lands. Or maybe it's the fact that there's no adventurer town nearby, and only the strongest survive in the wilderness, and there's not a single hunter in the vicinity that can handle them. And according to the assessment, most of them weren't young. Whatever the case, one must stay alert. Kai continued on his way and reached Urkano Mountain. He knew that the natural barrier protecting the country from a full-scale invasion by the Demon King's army, and the tallest of them all is called Death Wolf Mountain. According to rumors, a wise man lives on its summit, and there must be a village at the foot of the mountain. Kai did not want to stop and ran straight up the mountain, but suddenly Kai stopped abruptly when he saw the red flames. But when he got closer, he saw that the city was on fire. As he ran towards the city, he thought they were being attacked by the Demon King's army. The demons were in the city at that moment. Kai crept up and saw that the front line was far away from here, and he thinks he underestimated them. The demon asked Mr. Hector what they should do next, and could they just kill everyone here? Hector replied to leave them alone. They could use the men as slaves, and they had better tell me if they had learned anything about Elben. The demon replied that yes. Apparently he lives on top of the mountain of the Wolf of Death. Hector asked, so they got the right information? But it's a morass for them, but it can't be helped. Looking at the mountain, he said the priority was to capture Elben Kelith, so known as the Sage, and now they would camp for the night and move out at dawn. The demon asked, isn't this mountain home to the deadly wolfen wolves? And you can't subdue them, so you have to kill every last one of them to get to the top. One of the demons was very surprised and asked what? But the other answered that these wolves have highly developed intelligence, so their magic does not work on them, and the 4 heavenly kings can even subdue a dragon, but they can't do it. Hector said he wasn't very good at magic either. There's no point in whining about it now. They can't use it, so they'll kill it and move on. The demons all obeyed the order and replied that they understood. Kai watched everything and saw that it was quite organized. They are part of the elite of the Demon King's army. And then there's their leader, a demon named Hector, and he thinks there are only 10 higher demons in the Demon King's army. Attacking head-on is a bad idea. Suddenly Hector felt that someone was following them. He immediately turned his head toward the house, but there was no one there. Hector told the demons to search the place. There's a spy in here at the moment. Kai changed his seat and saw that it was the little smarty pants. The demons started asking, where is he? Let him come out immediately. Kai apologized mentally and said that hiding was his profile. But suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he saw that several demons had taken people hostage. But Kai had left them and he felt sorry for the villagers, but it was pointless to save them. His goal was the same as the demons, to find the sage, which means now he has to get up the mountain before they do. There is the highest and most dangerous of the Urkano Mountains, and it is called the Mountain of the Wolf of Death. Kai, like a true climber, went up the mountain, and said that of course he would not find a well-traveled path. He could only follow the tracks of the beasts. But now the visibility is poor, the ground is loose. And I'd like to speed up, but you have to be very careful in this place. He could barely see them. These are the same deadly wolves of the Wolfen. And now there are more and more of them on the way. But there were almost no tracks, they had everything under control. Suddenly a wolf howled and the whole pack came at him from different directions. Kai didn't take any chances and immediately jumped into the tree. He saw that the monster that made this mountain was called Deathwolf Mountain. Of course, it's understandable why most of those who venture up the mountain end up not returning. He decided at once to use his mark. But the wolves looked at him as prey and would not budge a step. But one of them was the strongest and smashed his head right into a tree, breaking it. But Kai grabbed one leaf and decided that he would amplify the leaf with miraculous power, and channeled it right into the wolf's body. The force of the attack was so strong that an ordinary reinforced leaf turned into a weapon and slashed the wolf's head. Once down from the tree, the wolves did not leave him alone, and immediately pounced on him with their sharp teeth to tear his body apart. But Kai didn't even bother with that and slammed his fist into the wolf's head, which even flew off hard and crashed right into the second wolf. But suddenly several more wolves appeared in his path, and the strongest of the pack came out and stood in front of him. Kai felt the body strengthening him. He hadn't expected such results. Leonora had told him that time that hero candidates relied on blessings and didn't know anything about miraculous powers. But with their blessing just children compared to the miraculous power, she can control them all at the same time. She was able to control them all at once thanks to her enslavement technique. You can get rid of this weakness with training and practice, and it is better to control the miraculous power. After all, he will be able to improve his physical stats and will be able to counter the magical attacks of his opponents with something. But it's not as impressive as a blessing. But it is one way to become stronger in this world. And so the time spent learning the technique will pay off. Kai used his knife and immediately cut the wolf and realized that while he would get to the top, one could practice miraculous power as well. Suddenly a lightning bolt suddenly passed between them, and Kai looked up to say that here came the pack leader. Vol got really angry after everything and opened his mouth, ready to swallow him. But Kai with his speed strode over and cut his head open. He looked around and saw that the others had retreated after the death of the leader. And that wasn't even a problem for him. And these are currently great targets for practice. Kai chased after them and even managed to catch up. But suddenly he saw that they were moving strangely, and he could anticipate their next move. Kai had fought them during the escape, and he was even doing well. But he was ready and he saw everything. As he finished off one wolf after another, he realized he was right. And now he can see about 1 second ahead. Looking at the remnants from the pack, he saw that they were all already scared and afraid of him like dogs. But Kai bared his knife and told them not to run away, and they could practice some more. Finished with everyone else, Kai continued on his way to the mountain. But looking at his hand, he wondered why it could foretell the future. Looking at his characterization, he saw that the display of weaknesses he received with the grade level increasing. And this time, too, the assessment made an effort. All skills are related to vision in one way or another. Suddenly, Kai sat down under a tree and felt exhausted. After all, the summit was near and he could rest for a while. But suddenly he felt the ground begin to shake. He thought that the Demon King's army was getting close. He immediately went out again on the road, for he had no time to rest. At this moment, at the foot of the Wolf of Death Mountain, the demons were already there and had destroyed several elves. The chief demon said it was the elf who was the survivor, which was to be expected from a girl who called herself a sage's apprentice. The head of the demons said it was time to end it already, and waving his hand at his servants ordered her to be killed. The elfess told them that at this rate, but suddenly one of the demons jumped at her with a sword and wanted to kill her. She was already ready to say goodbye to her life, and closing her eyes she could no longer see anything. But suddenly Kai jumped up and took her in his arms to save her from death, and the demon just missed with his attack. The elven woman was shocked to see that she had been rescued by a human. The demons said it was reinforcements. Kai looked and saw that there were 10 soldiers from the Demon King's army, and one supreme demon. The elven girl asked the guy why he saved her. Kai asked, and she's a disciple of the sage Elben, right? The elfess replied that yes, she did. Kai said that was her reason. He has business with the sage. Kai realized that he had already evaluated her, and her race is half-elf, and her skills include magic. The man in charge said he didn't care who he was. After all humans are their enemies at this point. The head ordered the servants to act without change and kill them both. Kai understood at that moment, to gain him the sage's favor, he must save her. So he would have to defeat them first. The demons didn't even waste time, and all of them came at him at once. Kai immediately activated his foresight. He began to notice all their attacks and dodge them. Kai realized during the battle that it was a good weapon, but using it against humans was overkill. He had destroyed a couple of their demons and saw that with foresight in close combat, he wouldn't lose. And the only problem was how long it would be effective, and how many minutes he still had. The head of the demons told them to stay away from him and attack with magic. The demons understood the order and immediately proceeded. All the demons possessed magic, and standing in a single formation, they activated magic bullets. Kai was shocked to see a magic technique in front of him. And then the elf came into the battle and used the dilute technique. Sylph the air spirit. Kai saw that she used the air to repel all the demon attacks and asked, "Is it magic?" He realized that this was a secret technique known only to elves that borrowed the power of spirits. The elfess replied that she did, and thanks to him her spirits were able to regain their strength. The chief got angry and took his sword in his hand and said that they would never be able to do that, and decided that he would handle them himself. Kai was surprised that the big boss decided to come out. He immediately turned to the elf. The elfess asked what was wrong. Kai replied that if she could take out the little bastard, he could kill their commander. The elfess replied that she could handle it, but could he stop referring to her that way? And her name is Maya. Kai threw the backpack away and said he understood, and relied on her, the sage's apprentice. Maya got angry and started yelling at him that her name was different and you shouldn't call her that. Suddenly, during his attack on the chief, the demon stopped with ease. But Kai didn't hesitate and kicked at his sword to free himself. The demon didn't want to give up either and continued to launch his powerful attacks with his huge sword. Kai saw the right moment to strike from above. But suddenly the demon managed to change stance and draw his second sword. As the collision progressed, Kai moved a distance away to catch his breath a bit. But the chief demon said he didn't expect him to dodge in time. Kai now realizes that this is what higher demons are like, and without foresight he'd be dead by now. But the demon chief said he was sorry, and if he hadn't been human, he would have had a chance of defeating him. Kai used his gaze and saw that his name was Hector, and the physical abilities of a supreme demon, high reactions, and add to that level 5 swordsmanship. And even with foresight, it's too dangerous to go head-on. And in that case, he decided he'd use a trick. Hector took a long look at the guy and told him not to stand a pillar, and immediately ran to attack. But Kai immediately anticipated his attack and decided to step back beforehand so he wouldn't touch him. But Hector didn't stop and continued trying to touch the guy with his sword. Kai was of course wounded again in the arm and thought what good was foresight if his body just couldn't keep up with his attacks. The gap between their forces was too wide. Hector asked the guy, would he just keep running like that? But Kai didn't think long and immediately let loose 3 ways into him. But Hector was surprised too and managed to put up his defense and took all 3 bullets in his hands. Kai didn't expect the demon to have time to defend itself from the bullets. But Kai let loose 2 more 2 ways and the target was his legs. Hector got very angry and said it was a new temple weapon. And that's when he fell for the cocky kid. But that didn't stop him and he immediately ran to attack and counterattack. But Kai took a chance and fired another bullet. But Hector told him not to get his hopes up. And he already knows where they're going. Kai put his gun away because he was out of ammunition. And his knives went into action. Hector saw all this and repelled them all with ease. But after that Kai threw a smoke bomb at him. But Demon was shocked and thought, but after such a grenade fell right in front of him, it immediately exploded, but Hector didn't expect that. The other demons saw the explosion and were afraid for their captain. But Maya shouted at them not to come any closer. But Maya thought during the battle, who is this guy? Even though he's human, but he has the power to fight a supreme demon. Kai picked up his sword again and realized his ammo was at 0 and this was the last grenade. He knew it wasn't enough to take him down. Hector said his weapons were strange. Suddenly, Hector rose as if to another level and increased his speed and began to make attacks while Kai tried to reflect them that he himself was even shocked. And in the moment, he realized that all he had to do was take advantage of it. So he decided to focus on the enemy's movements. Suddenly, he began to feel strange feelings. And realized it was a reflection of weaknesses. Kai saw with his eyes a vertical line that already showed his weak spot. He figured that was likely his weak point. Kai took advantage of this and attacked right at that very point. Kai finished him off and realized that foresight displaying weaknesses, the effectiveness is amazing. But suddenly he felt that he was getting very bad. And he saw that he was exhausted and it was very bad. The demons looked and said that their captain had lost. But the kid's exhausted too. And now they can take him down. Maya saw that her spirits were already at their limit too. But this man was protecting her and she must help him. The demons all piled up and immediately ran to kill the guy who had already been left without strength. But suddenly someone used fire magic and immediately put everyone in the flames and burned them alive. The demons were so exhausted and frightened that they even screamed and begged for help. Kai turned around in surprise and thought, what happened? After all, the power of fire was now many times stronger than Ren's flames. Saint suddenly appeared and told Maya that she apologized for being late. Maya looked up and excitedly began to run towards her mentor and cheer. And Kai, hearing this, realized that it was her, the Sage of Elben. The elfess thanked him and said that as she saw it was he who had saved her student. Kai replied that it was like that, and asked her that she was the Sage of Elben? The sage replied that she was. Though now she is more like just a pile of old bones, retired. Kai realized at once that he had guessed. Even though he couldn't make an assessment now, he could tell from the look of her that she was strong. And with his current powers, he's no match for her. And he believes the best strategy is honesty. Albana asked the guy he wanted something from her, right? Kai replied that she had good intuition. Albana asked why else would he come to such a remote area. She owed him a debt of gratitude for saving her student. And let him tell her what he's got there. If she could help, she would certainly do so. Maya asked her mentor that maybe they could get to the house first. The place smelled of blood and the wolfen would be here soon. Albana replied to the apprentice that she was true and told the boy to follow them. He could use some rest too. Kai didn't want to refuse because he knew he was in a bad place right now. And he saw that she favored him. He had risked his life for her student for a reason. An hour later, Maya said they'd arrived. It's a little modest, but she'll make herself at home. And now she would go wash up while they let them talk. Kai asked the girl why they had decided to settle here. Albana replied that there were many reasons, but the most important one was that she was tired of worldly concerns. Even now, when she has left her post, a lot of people are looking for her in order to use her in their plans. Kai said he understood everything, and getting here would not be possible for everyone. Albana replied that only talents like him could do it. She's not a monster after all, so if anyone could conquer the mountain, she would welcome them. And now she asks again, what business does he have with her? Kai replied that frankly he was looking for a way to return to his original world. Albana asked with surprise, the original world? In other words, Kai said that was right, he came from another world. And he was called here as a hero candidate to destroy the Demon King. Albana asked, the third generation of hero candidates? Rumors had reached her that they had been drafted. Kai asked with surprise, the third generation? And then he remembered Leonora saying something like that. And this wasn't the first time a draft had been held. The Demon King's army killed almost all of them. Maybe some of them managed to survive, but she doesn't know where they are. Albana said there was a call for hero candidates 5 years ago. This was their second attempt. The first attempt was 10 years ago, and the first generation and the second generation were completely defeated by the Demon King's army. And from that moment on, conscription was to be taboo. But Saint Leonora had the conscience to try a third time? She's been against it from the start. God's will or not, it is a questionable thing to put the fate of one's country in the hands of foreigners. Kai replied that he was against it too, so he killed Leonora. And we won't have to worry about such appeals. Albana was shocked and asked, did he kill Leonora? Kai replied that there are many ways to kill someone, even if the opponent is superior. Albana replied to him that as she could see he was not joking. The saint was killed by her own pawn, and she thinks it's karma. And his desire is understandable. Anyone in his position would want to go home. And she doesn't like long conversations either. Albana said she would cut to the chase, and revealed that her magic could not bring him back to her world. Kai became frustrated and asked if there were any ideas on how he could get back. Albana replied that humans have a technique that can summon someone here, but she can't bring them back, and the original was long lost. No one thought about this side of the issue, so no one invented the technique. Kai replied that Leonora had said the same thing. And it turns out the only way to defeat the Demon King. Albana said it must be so. Or among the magical techniques of demons there might be a suitable one. When Kai heard about the demons, he knew immediately that this was his next target. Albana said she didn't have much useful information for him and apologized for that. She still owes him for saving her student, and she'll try to think of something to help him. Kai was already pleased and excited. But Albana said that even though she thought he had a good chance of defeating the Demon King, Kai replied that it was too troublesome and he didn't want to take it on. But if sometimes there was no way out, he would kill the Demon King. Albana sensed that there was something odd about this boy. Even compared to the other hero candidates, it was as if an ashy and bottomless emptiness was growing in him. Kai thanked her for the information and called her a sage, and if she finds out anything, she can give him a message through the Adventurers Guild. And she'll say it's for Serena. Albana thought at that moment whether she could definitely trust this boy. Suddenly Maya came out of the shower and said it was so refreshing. Maya sat down on the couch and asked the guy if he wanted to take a bath too. Climbing a mountain and fighting to the death certainly hadn't made him any cleaner. Kai replied that this was true and that he would not refuse. But suddenly Albana told him that she had a proposition for her. Kai asked, and which one? Albana asked if he wanted to take her student with him on the journey. Maya was totally shocked and asked her, is it her? Albana asked her, does she see another student here? Maya could help him reach his goal faster, but Kai thought about it and replied that he refused. And he wasn't going to carry around such a noisy lady. After the conversation, Kai headed through the eastern region of the Demon Kingdom of Valder, and arrived at the front line with the sacred kingdom of Digrest. Kai looked up at the sky and said that it was good weather, and he had heard that the Demon Kingdom had a harsh climate. Maya replied that these lands used to belong to the sacred kingdom. The deeper one went into the Demon Kingdom, the worse the climate would be. Kai was surprised and asked that these lands were occupied by the Demon King's army. Maya replied that originally there was a large city of Nitrat on the western slope of Mount Urkin, and villages began to form around the city. But now Nitrat is under the control of the Demon King's army. They use it as a base of operations. And that's where they're headed now. They should be there in 2 days. Kai said he thought he already knew the answer, but what happened to the people of Nitrat? Maya replied that half were killed, half were made slaves. Some managed to cross the mountains and escape. Kai listened to her words and said that it was more clear now, and noticed that she knew a lot, and it was not for nothing that he took with him. Earlier, he had told Albana that he refused and was not going to carry such a rowdy lady around with him. Maya also replied that she didn't want it herself, and he didn't give up on a warrior like Kai. Albana told the boy not to talk like that. He is quite new to this world, and Maya can help him. Her knowledge is quite extensive. Kai replied to her that even if that was true, what benefit would it be to her to go with him? Albana said this child has not yet seen the world. Too young. All her knowledge comes from books, but her practical experience is almost non-existent. She thought about sending her on a trip, but alas, she is too worried about her student to send her off to an unknown destination alone. Kai asked her, is that why she decided to dump her on him? She could babysit her herself, right? Albana replied that she was no longer strong enough to go on long journeys. From a human perspective, she might look young, but her strength was running out. And then he showed up and saved her student. Maya replied that she was grateful but immediately averted her gaze. Kai said he was going to the demon kingdom this time. It's going to be dangerous there. If she gets in the way, he'll just leave her behind. Albana asked her student what would she say. In the end, it was up to her. It is her life, after all. Maya, hearing about her life, answered her mentor that she agreed. She would go with the man. Once on the road, Maya was not used to traveling. And after a few hours she started crying and saying that she was very tired. Kai told her that they were only one day into their journey. Maya replied that she was a mage, not a swordsman. And don't let her think she's tough. She tries to train though. Kai said there was nothing to be done about it and they were resting here tonight. Maya asked, wasn't he going to leave her if she got in the way? Kai replied that she shouldn't talk nonsense. If he was going to leave her, he wouldn't have taken her with him at all. And now let him move a little and pitch the tent. Maya heard the order and immediately got down to business. By nightfall, everything was already done and they even figured out a fire and began to warm themselves because it is very dangerous in the forest at night. But they didn't really have anything to eat. And Maya was so hungry that she ate only pure bread. Suddenly Kai told her that she understood that this would be a dangerous journey. He was ready to risk his own life if it would help him return home, but she has no reason to take such a risk. And he is sure that Albana was not lying, but is there another reason why she went with him? Maya replied that she was constantly thinking about how to tell him everything. But he apparently reads her through and through. She said that she was born in the Elven village, which was destroyed by the Demon King's army. Kai replied that he thought they were fighting humans. Maya said that it didn't matter to them. The demons were destroying everything in their path. Her family and her younger brother were all killed. She only survived because her father distracted them. Of course, she couldn't do anything then. After the army left, and she had nothing left to do but die in the forest. But her mentor found her. After that, she became her student. And so she lived. Kai said he wasn't interested in her past. He wanted to know her purpose. Maya asked what, he still didn't get it. In fact, she decided to become a mage and accepted the mentor's offer. Because she wants to have the power to kill demons. She remembers everything her mentor taught her. All these 10 years, she trained for revenge, and she will kill with her own hands those who took her family from her. Kai asked if she knew the name of this demon. Maya replied that his name was Wimberg, one of the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon King's army. The King of Wind. The commander-in-chief of the Demon King's army. Kai asked, and she went with him, hoping to find a trace of this demon. Only now he has no compelling reason to openly go against the demons. Maya replied that until now, the mentor refused to let her go. But she allowed her to go with him. She does not know the reason, but she is sure that the mentor has her own thoughts on this matter. So they will travel together for a while. Kai said that he will believe her. At home, Albana told him that she trusted her student and was sure that he would be able to pacify her if necessary. Kai understood the same thing, that if she had traveled alone, she would have simply died in search of her revenge. Maya apologized to him and said that they had had too difficult a conversation. And he shouldn't worry, she wasn't going to drag him into her problems. Kai understood that she wanted to do everything alone. And he answered her that everything was fine. And that would be the end of it. And it was time to go to bed because tomorrow morning she had to get up early. Maya stood up and said that she understood. And she would leave the spirits on guard to look out for monsters. Kai went to his tent and thought about the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon King's army. But suddenly he heard Maya sleeping and muttering something in her sleep. But he couldn't sleep, and looking at the stars he thought that they would clearly be stronger than the demon he had fought the other day. And now he needs to become even stronger. But suddenly he decided that there was no reason to worry about it yet. At this time, on the western border of the sacred kingdom of Digrest, in the city of Fort, a serious conversation was taking place in the negotiation room. The old man said that he had already shown the others many times. It was time for the hero candidates to go on the attack. But the elder replied that they understood his point of view. But what exactly was he proposing to attack? Amelia immediately pointed her finger and replied that Fort Eris. It was originally theirs, so why not take it back? Moreover, it is an important strategic point for the enemy. Capture Eris and force them to retreat. Henry listened and said that it was too dangerous. Until now they had only been on the defensive. And suddenly go on the offensive. The old man was surprised and asked, what was the captain of the 8th squad afraid of? After all, the hero candidates are under his direct command. Amelia also said that Henry had a point, the enemy should have let down their guard by now. They clearly weren't expecting them to attack first. She asked Mito if they were ready. Mito said yes. If they gave the order, he would rush into battle immediately. Coming out of the conference room, Heinrich said that the operation was scheduled for tomorrow. Amelia was in too much of a hurry. Mireille felt uneasy and asked if everything would be okay. Everyone seemed confident about it, but Mito said it was better to attack now, while the enemy was recovering. And he didn't see anything wrong with that. Henry replied that they relied too much on their strength. That was the only reason they insisted on attacking. But they were strangers here, and he could not object to the orders of his superiors. Mireille said they had no other choice. But Henry replied that they would support them with all they could, but that they were the main attacking force. And now let them get a good night's rest. Mito suddenly began to feel uneasy. But he no longer had a choice. The next day they reached Fort Eris in secret. Rena suddenly asked why they left at dawn. Wouldn't it be better to use the night for a surprise attack? Heinrich replied that demons have well-developed night vision, and at night they would be at a disadvantage. Mito decided that they needed to go over the plan again. Their goal was to eliminate the local leader while the main forces were distracted, and most likely their leader is a higher demon. Only he will fight him, and they will take advantage of the moment and start running until he notices them. Suddenly the warrior came up and told the captain that a message had arrived from the main squad, and it was time to begin the operation. Heinrich replied that he understood everything and told the boys that it was time to begin the operation. The warriors led by Amelia were already in the city and were fighting the demons. The demons were so terrible and evil that they tore everything apart in their path. Amelia attacked them from her horse and shouted to her army to destroy the demonic army. But the main demon was on the tallest building all this time and watched everything that was happening. But Mito and his team were already inside the building and heading towards the demon king. But the king was guarded by demons, and when he saw people, they asked who they were. But Mito did not communicate with them and cut them into small pieces with a sword. The students saw this and told the captain that he was a great guy, and you can always rely on him. But Henry told him to stay alert, and probably their leader is in the next room. But suddenly demons appeared in front of them and shouted that there were strangers in the castle and they needed to be killed. Turning around, they again saw that they were trapped as they were surrounded by demons on both sides. The students shouted that it was a trap. What should they do next? Heinrich said that the 8th detachment would cover the rear and let the hero candidates go forward. Mito replied that he understood the order, that they were counting on him, and he decided to turn to Renee. But Rena had already understood everything and told him that he didn't have to say it. And she released her fiery flame right onto the demons. The demons were unable to cope with her fire, and immediately everyone died on the spot without even having time to escape. With slow steps, they reached the main gate, and Mito told them to open the gate for him. Opening the gate, Mito was shocked to see the demon sitting on his throne and waiting for them. One of the students asked who it was. Erasure asked the demon if he was their boss. The demon turned towards them and looked with red eyes and replied that his name was Stangai, and he was the king of the earth. And he was one of the 5 heavenly kings of the demon king's army. Rin asked in surprise, for heavenly kings? But Mireille said it was just a title. But Mito immediately felt that this was not so. After all, incredible pressure was emanating from him. Stangai raised his huge sword and asked the boys if they were candidates for heroes and let them show him what they were made of. Mito immediately grabbed his sword tightly and told the others to be ready. But he tried not to be afraid anymore, and if they lose, then everyone involved in the operation will die. Stangai didn't play around with them and immediately began testing what they were capable of, and immediately attacked. Mito was shocked by his speed and took the blow on himself, feeling that this demon was very strong. The students were all afraid for him because they saw how serious the attack was. But he managed to repel it. Mito stood up and said that he was fine and nothing had happened. But Erasure decided to attack too and did it in a rat-like manner by attacking from behind. Erasure was about to launch an explosive attack and thanked Mito for distracting him. Erasure managed to do his explosive strike, and the demon didn't even expect one of them to get so close to him. After the explosion, the disciple asked what had happened to him. But upon closer inspection, they saw that the demon had used the earth's protection and had reflected Arashi's explosion. But even so, he also attacked Erasure with a stone and hit him right in the chest. The guy was in shock that he couldn't even feel his body. The demon asked, "Is this all that the hero candidates can do?" Mito stood in front of him with his team and said nothing. But the demon placed his hand on the ground and opened his seal. And suddenly the ground exploded beneath him and a protective material appeared. After some time, human bodies began to appear from the ground, which were created from dirt and earth. The students were shocked by what they saw and asked, "What is this? Are these really golems?" The demon king created clones of himself in the form of golems, and he stood behind them and looked at them. The king smiled, thinking that the students were too weak, and gave the signal to his creatures to attack. Mito got ready and told them not to let them get close to them. Rhea replied that he understood everything and started to act. Rhea immediately saw them approaching and used the wind cutter, and aimed it straight at Golev, but nothing happened. But suddenly after that he improved his cutting attack and cut the golem into several pieces with his attack. Arashur also entered the war and with his explosive fist struck the golem right in the head. After destroying one golem, he saw that they were regenerating again. Arashur asked, "What use are these slow stones?" The Demon King immediately used his powers after hearing his words and began to restore the golem's body. Mito was shocked and couldn't believe his eyes. But the golems that were destroyed were restored again. Arashur was surprised and asked, "Are they recovering?" The golem approached the guy and immediately struck with his fist. But the guy was faster and dodged. Seeing this, the two students took one golem on themselves and both attacked it with their blows. Rin also entered the battle and used magic to capture one of the golems and ordered it to stop. The golem followed the instructions and stopped at the last moment. After all, Rin saw that he would attack the student and decided to save him. One of the students who wielded a spear picked the moment and while attacking shouted, "Now." And then he began to rejoice that he had succeeded. But the golem was stronger than him and the spear did nothing to his body. He immediately swung his fist and hit the guy, so he didn't even dodge and flew into the wall. Mireille was also tired of all this and, using telekinesis, lifted the stones above her and sent them straight into the golem. After being hit by the rocks, the golem suddenly dissolved from a solid state to a liquid one. Everyone was shocked and Arashur said that there was not a scratch on him. And he read about it in one manga. Ria said that in such cases the only way out is to defeat the mage who created them. And he will occupy these golems. Mito agreed and replied that they would deal with the demon. And with the help of speed, he decided to go to the magician. Stongai looked at all this and said that they underestimated him. And again he opened the land filled with seals. From one seal, strange objects suddenly began to appear with which he attacked the student. Mito didn't expect this turn of events and immediately used his sword to destroy them. While Mito was fighting one of the four heavenly kings, Kai arrived at the city of Nitrat, which had been captured by the Demon King's army. But in order not to be seen, he decided to take the path through the tunnel in a place from which people would not even think that they had entered the city. Maya was shocked and said that she never thought that they could get into the city through the sewers. Kai told her to be patient. They should be under Nitrat by now. And the demons see in the dark all around the city is an open field, and usually the defenses of large border cities are strengthened. They won't get through head-on, and soon they will get to the surface. Seeing the stairs, he realized that this was the exit to the city. Coming out of the sewers, Maya said that they had finally arrived. But suddenly Kai saw someone coming and told her to hide behind a barrel. At that moment, the demons were passing through the city and keeping order. But one of them was tired and said that he was bored. The second demon asked him what he was complaining about. They had fallen into the mistress witch's guard. Such a chance does not come often. The demon said that just because they came under her command did not mean that they would achieve any military merit. And it doesn't seem like she's interested in all this. The second demon replied that the lady was talented, but her behavior left much to be desired. And it's better not to blab about it again. The demon said he knew. At that moment the boys were in the corner and hiding so as not to be noticed. Maya saw nothing in front of her and said that they were gone. Kai asked in surprise, "Mistress Witch? Are they talking about the princess of the demon kingdom who rules the city?" And it seems she was called the Void Witch. And she is the one he is looking for. Albana had previously said that a witch who could control space lived in the border town of Nitrat. And perhaps she could help him. Kai thought and said that there was only one question left, how to contact her. If they just showed up to her, it would turn into another battle. Maya asked him what he would do. Kai replied that he needed to gather more information first, and let her do as she is told and nothing more. Maya replied that she understood everything. During the day, the city was filled with demons, and even on every corner, all the demons were drinking and talking. Kai and the girl climbed into the house and, observing everything, said that everything was clear. Maya was shocked and said that they have the most ordinary life. She is a little disappointed. Kai replied that they had sufficiently developed intelligence to understand human speech. Naturally, their habits could be human, but suddenly he pointed his finger and pointed it at the children who were slaves and worked for the monsters. Suddenly, the demon got angry at the girl while working and asked what she was doing, and let her move faster. Instead of scolding, he beat her with a whip. Maya was shocked and said that these people were slaves. Kai asked her why she was so surprised, and she should know that they use people as slaves. Maya thought about it and answered that it was true. She knew about it very well, but they are so twisted. Kai looked at her and wanted to turn, but he saw her horrible side. Kai used his blue eye and suddenly heard someone ask if they were demons. And turning around, they saw that there was a demon behind them. Kai immediately grabbed the knife and realized that he hadn't even noticed her. And how could he not notice her presence? But the demon girl said that there was no need for that. She had not come here to fight. Kai asked what her intentions were. And how did she know they were here? He realized she had managed to get close to them, and it's probably some kind of magic technique or some other trick. The demon girl said that strangers had penetrated her barrier. So she came looking for them. Maya asked in surprise, barrier? But she didn't feel any signs of spells. The demon girl replied that it was because no one could detect her spatial technique. Kai immediately thought, what kind of spatial technique is she talking about? And did the evaluation really activate? The girl immediately introduced herself and said that her name was Isabel. And she was the 5th princess of the demon kingdom of Water. Kai knew immediately that she was the one he needed. But Isabel told them that if they did not answer her questions, she would call the soldiers. She asked what the man and the elf needed here. They didn't look like scouts. Kai understood and was not sure that he could survive the battle against her. And he would like to continue the peaceful dialogue. Kai replied that he would be happy to tell, but it was a long story. Isabel left it at that and said that she was there anyway to kill time. After listening to him speak, Isabel asked him what he wanted to do to return to his world. Kai replied that he had been told that spatial technology could help him with this. The girl answered that he was not lying. She could send him to another world. Kai was surprised and asked her if she was lying, and he would never have thought that he would be able to communicate with the witch he needed so easily. And unlike other demons, she does not show any hatred towards people. Isabel replied that for that she needed to know the coordinates of his original world. And where was his world, the one he came from? Kai was surprised and did not understand what she meant. The girl said that the spell itself was not the most difficult, but until she had the necessary coordinates, she would not be able to send him back. Kai asked, and how can he find out the coordinates? The girl answered that there are countless worlds, and finding one is definitely very difficult. Kai made an assessment and saw that the truth says that she is not lying, and he received a useful improvement after increasing the assessment level. Isabel said that it was possible to use his body as a navigator, but it was blessed by the Creator God. So it was impossible. Her technique won't be able to break through the blessing. Kai asked, so he has to follow the will of God. And the only way to get out of here is to kill the Demon King? The girl replied that she could not say that. Kai wondered if there really was no easy way out. And it looked like he would have to do it after all. Kai decided that he would kill the Demon King, and that was it. The girl saw his face and said that it seemed like he had already made up his mind. Kai replied that he would like to return home using magical techniques, but apparently there would be no easy solution. Maya asked her why she was so willing to help them. Wasn't she the princess of the Demon Kingdom? Elizabeth replied that the Demon Kingdom is not eternal either. She has her own interests. Suddenly they saw that she used something and immediately prepared themselves. And the girl opened her portal and told them to take care of themselves. And it will be very difficult for them to escape from this city. Having disappeared, Maya said that she was very scared and already thought that they were finished. Kai said that she was the daughter of the Demon King and very strong. And now they would never defeat her. Maya replied that she had helped them a lot. Kai said that was true, but such luck usually came at a price. Maya got scared and asked him not to scare her. But suddenly they heard screams in the city and Kai asked what was going on. The demons were already ready and the leader was shouting for them to find them. After all, human scouts had entered the city. Maya said that they had already been discovered. Kai replied that it had happened immediately after the witch had disappeared. Maya asked, so it was she who turned them in? Then why did she leave? And what was the point? Kai replied that it was useless to try to understand her train of thought. And they needed to get out of here as soon as possible. Having climbed onto the roof, they decided to escape through it. The demon asked the others if they had found it. After all, they should be somewhere here. Kai saw that they were absolutely sure that they were in the city. Someone had given them an order, and they couldn't check the status because they were far away. And it was very troublesome. But suddenly they heard a knock, and they stopped immediately. Maya asked him why he stopped. The guy told her to bend down and not move. He felt a magical power, just like a witch. One of the main kings appeared in front of the demons and ordered everyone to stand in line. Maya saw this person and said that it was Wimberg. Kai was very surprised and saw that she was not herself. The girl said that she couldn't believe that he was here. And it was not for nothing that she went with him to this place. Kai asked her if she wanted to take revenge on him. Maya answered that she did. And she would never forget him. Wimberg is one of the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon King's army, and is the king of the wind. Kai immediately activated his eye evaluation and looked at him. Looking at his characteristics, he saw that he was strong. Kai put his hand on her shoulder and told her to calm down first. And now they won't defeat him. Kai said he once heard that the wind technique was used to detect enemies. and they should move even more quietly after that. Winberg asked if the scouts had really penetrated them. The demon replied that they themselves didn't really know yet, but the chief said that he didn't even have to answer, it was a rhetorical question. And if they were really here, they would definitely destroy them. Winberg said that they had sent candidates for heroes to the front, their trump card, and now they cannot afford to disrupt the rear, and their mouth is simple but very important. The demon asked him if he was sure he wanted to stay in the rear. After all, he thought that the master would be more useful in the front. Winberg replied that this place was more suited to his skills. Let the others take their chances. And suddenly he used his wind powers and said that it was very wonderful. The demon asked the master if he had found them. Winberg answered that he had. And the wind currents told him. And they move very carefully, but they cannot escape from his searching wind. The demon told the master that he could detect people or the necessary object simply by the wind phenomena. And it is not for nothing that the wind technique is so difficult to master. And no matter how much he looks, he is always amazed. Winberg replied that flattery was fine, but he'd better prepare a search party. And the people the witch had hidden were very interesting. And it looked like he'd be able to have some fun. Kai suddenly felt something in his path and told Maya to stop and not move. At that moment, Demon was around the corner shouting for the others to find them. And they are somewhere here. Kai said they know where they are going, but they don't know the exact location. And suddenly Maya said that the wind currents began to move somehow unnaturally. The spirits also believe that this is not a good sign. Kai looked and replied that this was a wind attribute search technique. And this was another problem for them. But the girl said that she could use magic to destroy the technique. But they could be discovered. Kai replied that it would be better to leave everything as is so that they wouldn't be caught completely. And they would lose a little tail. And if they were caught, they would simply be overwhelmed by numbers. The demons still couldn't find them and were constantly wandering the streets of the city in search of enemies. And Kai and the girl tried to escape from them, when suddenly one of the demons shouted that they were here and ran in a crowd after them. Maya apologized and said it was all her fault. Kai told her not to worry, they still had the advantage. She will become bait. Maya was shocked when she heard these words and didn't even know about it. Suddenly Kai left her downstairs and climbed the buildings. Maya screamed at him to stop because she couldn't do that. Kai replied that she wanted revenge. And how would she do it if she couldn't even escape from pursuit? The demon shouted that they were separated. Maya did not stop and continued running, but Maya heard already run and decided that she can do what she wants. And immediately woke up her salamander. The demons didn't even know she was capable of such a thing. And they were already on fire and dying alive. After this, Maya began to run further and used this method to stop them. But suddenly there was a stranger among them and Kai began to cut every demon that was in front. Suddenly the strongest one stopped and asked what that sound was. But when he turned around, he was already in shock, because all the others were lying dead on the ground. Kai got close to him too and put a knife to his neck. But Demon said that he was a coward and the guy cut his throat. Maya didn't even look back all this time and continued to run. And at that moment she stopped and used the Undine technique. With this technique, she used a water attack and filled the alley to the brim. But the demons were so huge that the water was no problem for them. And Maya saw that she was able to hold them back. But there was no end to them. But suddenly, in a moment, everything changed, and behind her, the demons slowly began to disappear, and the girl felt better and better. Kai used his stealth and entered the line and began to kill everyone. And the girl saw with her own eyes that they began to become fewer. Suddenly the strongest one remained in the line and, turning around, he was shocked to find that he was the only one left while the rest were already lying dead in the water. But before he could turn back, Kai took advantage of this moment and stuck a knife into his head. Kai told the girl that she played a great bait, and he managed to kill them without any problems. Maya asked him if he knew that she almost died here. But suddenly Winberg approached the main demon and asked if they caught them. The demon replied that he was truly sorry, and soon reinforcements would arrive who would start looking for them again. But Winberg raised his hand to the sky and said that it was no longer necessary. This would only increase the number of deaths, and he had already decided that he could handle them himself. At the moment of escape, a wind suddenly appeared and Maya said that she felt mana in it. The boys stopped because the wind was coming straight at them and they realized that they had already been caught. But Maya also decided to use her technique and spread the wind throughout the city and used the wind spirit sylph. But Kai realized that he was already walking towards them. And Winberg was already above the city and seeing them said that it looked like these were not just rats, but invaders. And Maya, seeing his face in front of her, became very angry and said his name out loud. And Kai said that he thinks they have a chance to take her revenge. And is she ready for it? Maya replied that she had been preparing for this moment for decades. and she would take revenge on him for all the insults he had caused her. Kai used a hidden voice and said that if the battle dragged on, they would definitely lose, and they must deal with him as quickly as possible, preferably with one blow. Did she understand? Kai asked. Maya answered that yes, and immediately summoned the wind spirit sylph, and directed the attack from different sides at the enemy. But Winberg said he was one of the 4 heavenly kings, the master of the wind, and they think they can defeat him with the wind. He can't even tell if they are too brave or just too stupid. And using his wind seal, he created a barrier around himself. And Maya's attacks simply did nothing to him, and were reflected by the enemy's barriers. Kai saw that he had blocked his view, but suddenly Winberg attacked from the barrier. But Kai dodged them and didn't even understand how he was able to catch him and even attack him. Winberg asked him if he was thinking of closing the distance while he couldn't see him. They had figured it out by now, hadn't they? His spell of searching wind will not let even the slightest movement pass by. Kai realized that he would be a big problem, and even if he had a blind spot, the wind would compensate for it. It was a natural enemy for his killing techniques. But Maya replied that everything was fine, and told him to leave it to her. And again she called upon the spirits to attack. Winberg was surprised and couldn't believe that she could do that. Maya replied that the search technique works by precisely manipulating the wind. But if she constantly interferes with the wind flows, it will destroy his technique. Winberg noticed that she knew how his wind magic worked. And how did this elf know his fighting style? Kai also saw and understood that it was amazing. And the thirst for revenge gives amazing effects. Kai immediately climbed the house to attack. But Winberg noticed him and thought, why would he come so close? But Kai took advantage of this moment and immediately jumped out with his sword, but Winberg rose even higher and told him that it was not meant to be. Winberg said that he thinks he can't fly. Kai got angry and remembered about the flying technique like Narumi. Suddenly Maya told him to jump. Kai immediately jumped out after hearing these words, and she helped him get to him with the help of the wind. Winberg was surprised and couldn't believe that he would get to him. And Kai decided that he would kill him while he was confused, and immediately applied the prediction and display of weak points and activated it. His eyes immediately changed color and became red. Kai saw that Winberg would make an attack from his side, and suddenly he noticed that even his weak spot was gone. Winberg started to get angry and said that they even forced him to draw his sword. He immediately used his sword attack to stop the boy from reaching him. But Kai stopped and began to reflect all the attacks. Kai realized that he had used foresight too early. Winberg told him to know that it was he who taught Hector fencing. But suddenly he saw a huge stone flying at him, and he immediately stopped so that it wouldn't hit him. Kai flew down and didn't take any more risks to attack him in the sky, since he lacked the experience and techniques to fly. Winberg thought that such a stone would be difficult to repel with wind magic. They also know earth magic. This is definitely not an ordinary elf, and they destroyed the elven village long ago. And maybe Winberg shouted that it was she who killed Hector? Maya replied that yes, it was her. And now he knows what it's like to lose someone close to him. Winberg thought and said that he understood, and that meant she was a survivor from that village. Maya replied that it had been 10 years, all those years she had been training to kill him. Winberg started laughing and said it was nostalgia. He still remembers that day. It was so much fun. Maya was so shocked by his words that she even froze. And Winberg said that all these screams and cries, each of them fought not for themselves but for the lives of their loved ones. They begged for mercy for just one. Even he was touched. And it was so wonderful, watching them fall into despair. Maya got angry and started to lose her temper. But Kai stood in front of her and told her not to fall for his provocations. And now he needs her magic. Maya understood and replied that she would do everything. Kai calmed down and began to think. He realized that he had to take every chance he could to defeat him. He had attacks for both long and short range, no weak points. And suddenly it occurred to him to take advantage of the provocation and perform the annoying duet. But Winberg didn't really think they'd last that long. And this guy was just a human. He asked Kai if he was a hero candidate by any chance. Kai looked at him and replied that he had guessed correctly. Winberg said that he knew almost all the dangerous people from their country. And since he sees him for the first time, the answer is obvious and he is their new weapon. And he understood that this guy is at a disadvantage. And he has nothing to worry about. And he is much stronger than them. Kai looked at him and decided to extend his foresight for another 3 minutes. He understood that if he didn't deal with him quickly, but Maya suddenly turned to him and told him to lend him his ears. And she had an idea. But Kai told her that he understood everything and told her not to interfere with him either. But Maya told him that those were her words. Winberg was already tired of waiting for them and asked if they had finished coming up with a plan. Kai activated his skills and told her that it was time for them to begin. Winneberg was prepared for anything and told them to come. Maya used her wind technique to lift Kai into the air so he could come up and strike. But then she struck the ground with her staff and summoned the spirit of the dwarf land, and immediately ordered them to attack him, and sent pieces of stone straight at him. But Winneberg used his seal in response to repel all of her attacks. But in a moment he saw that he was distracted. Kai didn't miss this chance, and during Maya's attack he came very close to him and attacked with his knife. But Maya shouted that it was not over yet, and she used an attack from the other side and sent the stones straight into his back. Winneberg was shocked that she could still control them, and now he needed to dodge, but he couldn't, and he decided to use the wind wall. Suddenly Maya ordered Sylph to come to her, and slowly began to pull him with air. Winneberg was shocked and didn't know how she did it. After all, she immediately used the same attack with the stones again. Having destroyed the stone, Kai saw that it was open. He immediately used this moment and attacked. But Winneberg tried to repel the guy's attack, but he failed, and in the end, Kai did so that he wounded his hand and knocked out his sword. Winneberg immediately realized that Kai was aiming not at the heart, but at the sword. Kai knocked the sword out of his hands, caught it, and moved away. Winneberg was so distracted that he even forgot that the girl had attacked him. And before he could react, he received stones on his back. Winneberg said he was surprised and they managed to break through his defenses. But do they really believe they are strong enough to hurt him? Maya was shocked and asked, did they not hit him? Kai just looked and realized that so far everything was going according to plan. Maya said that his wind technique is strong, but he has a weakness: heavy objects, and he is weak against the earth attribute. And the stones are harder to hit with a wind flow. But if that's not enough, she'll just use wind magic. By disrupting the flow, she'll weaken his technique. Kai also saw that her words about revenge were not empty words. She had the power to kill him, and she had even made the necessary plan for this. But as far as he can see, it's not really enough. Kai told her it was a good plan. Let him do what he wants, but he needs to be forced to open up, and he will take the sword from him again. Kai prepared to attack the enemy and looked at him from the cliff. Maya didn't understand him and wondered what he had in mind. And for some reason he needed the sword. But Winneberg told him that he was definitely not a swordsman candidate for hero. Does he think he can defeat him with his own sword? But Kai told him no, and immediately began to attack him with two swords and launch short attacks at him. But suddenly distracting him, he immediately jumped on him and went for his attack. But Winneberg used his elbow to deflect it. Winneberg was in shock and did not yet understand who he was. And suddenly he began to move better. Kai continued to attack and tried not to let him go. Winneberg did not understand what was happening around him, but he felt that he was being pressed. Maya used the same technique again and ordered Sylph to knock him down. With a gust of wind, she swept him off his feet. Winneberg screamed that it was impossible. And now Kai is using his own flight magic, and Kai approached him and said that this was the end. But Winneberg used his trump card and told the guy not to hope for this. Winneberg hoped that he could handle such an attack, but Kai was also no ordinary warrior and cut off his head. Kai came down and realized that he had run out of strength. But at the end Winneberg said that he never thought that he would lose like this. And why did he suddenly move differently? Kai replied that it was the blessing of copying. He could copy one skill of another person that he had personally seen, and he used this power to copy his swordsmanship. It had not been used in practice yet, so he was reluctant to use it until the very end. Winneberg asked in surprise, the blessing of the creator god. Candidates for heroes, apparently it is not for nothing that they call him the trump card of humanity. Kai replied that he had gained this power after killing Hector. But Winneberg said that he was just a foolish student who helped their enemy survive. After the mission, Kai looked at the enemy's bodies and said that this is the power of one of the 4 heavenly kings, and there are 3 more like that. Then the Demon King, who is the strongest of them all. And then the king's children, like Isabel. And now it is still too early for him to fight them. Suddenly he noticed that Maya was approaching him and raised his gaze to her. Maya asked the guy, is he dead? Kai answered that everything is correct. Deader than ever, and asked her, how should she get revenge? Maya replied that there was no way and she couldn't comprehend it. She thought she would have to sacrifice herself, but it was all over. And yet she feels so rested. After his death, neither mother nor father nor the village will return, but she finally feels free of the past. Kai said that she really helped him a lot. Without her, he would have definitely lost. Maya looked at him and said that those were her words. She had trained for 10 years to kill him, and now she is very grateful to him that he helped her avenge her family. Kai replied that he had no choice. She had nothing to thank him for. But Maya said that she was still glad that she had decided to go with him. One day, her patience would have run out anyway. Then she would have run away from her mentor and died in vain. And she thinks her mentor knew it too. Kai asked her what she would do now. Maya replied that she hadn't figured it out yet. All the important things were over. Kai looked at her and said that she would probably have to find a new meaning in life. How long do elves live? Maya replied that she was half human and did not think she would live as long as her mentor. And suddenly she remembered and said that for now she could just follow him. Kai asked her if she was sure. He was going to kill the Demon King. Maya asked if they killed the Demon King, then no one would have to experience what she did, right? And now it was worth it. But Maya said that if he didn't need her, then she would have to go to the king alone. Kai decided and replied that help would not be superfluous. It was time for them to move out because reinforcements would arrive soon. Maya, hearing such words, was very happy. And with happiness she skipped after him. But suddenly, at the sight of Winberg's murder, a portal appeared and Isabel revealed herself and watched them as they left. Isabel said they had exceeded her expectations. She had thought of using them if they escaped, but she had not expected them to be able to kill Winberg. And now no one will stop her. After everything that happened, Kai and Maya returned to Albana. Albana said she was very glad they were able to return safe and sound. But she had not expected them so soon. Maya was still in shock and wanted to say something to her mentor. But Albana caressed her and replied that she understood everything. She asked, "Does it mean that the student will continue to follow this boy?" But she only wishes her luck. Many interesting things await her. Suddenly Albana asked the boy if he knew about the situation on the front line. Kai immediately understood everything and asked what happened. Elbane replied that it seemed that the hero candidate squad had been defeated. Kai was very surprised that Mito had lost. Kai asked what they were fighting. Elbane replied that they were fighting one of the 4 heavenly kings of Stungum. Maya said that means he's on the same level as Winberg, and very strong. Kai asked were they killed, and by some miracle they survived. But the morale of the hero candidates dropped sharply. Kai put his glass on the table and said that he would go and check on them. And he knew that his goal now was to kill the Demon King, and we need to gradually weaken him. And the easiest way is if Mito and the others help with killing the remaining heavenly kings. Maya asked, are the other hero candidates as strong as him? Kai answered that he doesn't know. And it's not the presence of power that matters, but whether she uses it correctly or not. At this moment, in the town of Fort Thors, the rear was filled with wounded, and a group of doctors were looking after them and treating them. Mireille was treating Mito, and after applying painkiller to the wound, she asked him if everything was okay, and she would now heal his wound. Mito told her not to worry. She couldn't overexert herself. She couldn't use her powers forever. Mireille said that she understood, but that was all she could do. And immediately she used her magic and directed it at the boy's hand. Earlier in the battle, Heinrich had come to them and asked if they were safe. Mito knew that Heinrich and the rest of the soldiers had joined them after clearing the rear, and they had managed to retreat. But looking into the room, he saw that everyone was badly injured. Not only physically, but also mentally. Rena was also badly wounded and couldn't even believe that they were defeated, and she became very sad. Suddenly Mito clenched his fist and said that it was all because of him and he had to defeat him. At this time, in the territory of Fort Ariza, one of the 4 kings sat on the top of his castle and looked around. Kai was also near Fort Eris, and using his gaze, seeing him, he said that it was him. Maya was surprised and asked him if he was able to see him at such a distance. Kai replied that as the evaluation level increases, all side skills improve. Vision range is one of them. The girl told him that his skill was very convenient. Kai looked and opened the characteristics and saw that his name was Stunge. And then, having activated the assessment in detail, he saw that his resilience while in defense, his normal abilities were enhanced several times. Kai thought that the 4th level of evaluation has a detailed evaluation. It is useful. And he knows how the enemy's skills work, and this can be their advantage. And then Kai applied the technique of displaying weak points. But in the end he saw that nothing was revealed, and he realized that he had no weak points to exploit now. Maya asked him if they had learned anything. Kai replied that if he had a weak point it would be easier. But he found out that he had a high level of ground and swordsmanship. And there's also a unique skill that only works if he's defending himself, that's all. Maya said that the technique of the earth, and that is why among the 4 kings he received the title of the King of the Earth. The earth attribute is weak to the water attribute. Kai asked if there is also compatibility of attributes. Maya answered that not really. And first of all, it all depends on what he wants to get from the combination of 2 techniques. And he can't be good at all earth techniques, there must be something specific. If they figure out what kind of spell it is, they can figure out his weaknesses. And even now she is one guess. Kai replied that he thinks they should at least talk to them once. Mito also climbed to the top of the Fort Thorsa building and looked into the distance. He thought that if Kai was here, but then he changed his mind and began to deny everything. And he even said that Mito wouldn't run away. But suddenly his team gathered behind him and asked what he was doing here. Rina said she knew he'd be here. He always had to do things alone. Mito was shocked when he saw the guys because he didn't even tell them that he was there and was sitting in his thoughts. But Ria also told him not to look like that. The game isn't over yet, is it? Mireille also answered Mito that it was true. They wouldn't let him fight alone. Mito was surprised and asked, do they still trust him? Rina walked next to him and asked in response why he still can't trust them, and finally called him a blockhead. And Ria hugged him and said that she wanted to tell him to rely on them more. Mito was surprised and asked in surprise, rely on them? And honestly, he didn't even think about it. Ria said that they all became stronger and he couldn't help but agree with that. So don't be shy and share your burden, otherwise he might break his back. But then Erasure came and told Mito that this is where he is, and asked the guy what he was looking at. Next time, just let him blow up that stone freak. Mito replied that he was surprised. He didn't even think that he would come to him. Erasure said that he didn't want to admit it, but he couldn't handle him alone. And now the team is only on him, and he will knock the brains out of this old man. Rhea was surprised and said that Erasure agreed to work in the team. And it looks like it will snow today. Erasure got very angry after their words and told them to shut up or he would kill them now. Mito agreed with him and said that they would defeat him together. Erasure was surprised and told the captain that he seemed to be thinking faster. Rin stood aside at that moment and looked at them. She was glad that they were all united, but they still had no tactics against Stongai. A man's voice suddenly sounded and told Rin that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. She looked down and was so shocked that she even made a few sounds. But Kai told her to be quiet. After all, he didn't want to be noticed. Rin covered her mouth with her hands and tried not to say anything. But Kai said that he heard that they fought against one of the 4 heavenly kings and lost to him. Rin didn't hide anything and answered that yes. And Kai asked her if she could tell what spells he used. Rin replied that she could tell and proceeded to tell him everything in detail. Kai listened to her and said that he understood everything. And that meant that the enemy created the golems and controlled them. Rin replied that it was all true. She had seen his technique herself and was 100% sure. And then Kai said that Maya was right. Rin, hearing the girl's name, immediately began to ask, who is it? And let him not say that it is a girl. Kai replied that it was just thinking out loud. And he was grateful for the information. Rin asked him if he wanted to fight with them. Kai replied that he would help them, but if he acted openly, it would only create discord within the team. And he decided that he would act from the shadows as always. After all, it would be better for them and for him as well. The next day, Fort Eris was already a fully guarded territory. The monsters arrived home and stood guard over their home. And the warriors were already in the forest and preparing for the attack. After all, they should not waste any more time. The girl was shocked and said that together with Yumi there would be only 100 of them. Rina answered that yes. And she is glad that she is already better. Student number 9, Kanoshita Yumi, who recently joined the combat squad, thanked Rina and said that she would try to keep up. But Rina said she was surprised when Yumi decided to join them. So what prompted her? Yumi thought about it and replied that she heard that they were having a hard time. So she decided to help. Mireille was also happy and said that she was a heroine. But Yumi really hoped that everything would be fine for them. 5 days ago, Yumi worked as a maid, and when she came home she said that she was very tired. But suddenly Kai came into her room and told her that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Yumi replied that it had been a long time, but then she raised her head and saw the guy and started screaming in fear. She asked him how he got here, and looking closely she asked the guy that his name was Kai. The guy didn't say anything and asked if they had reached her. Yumi asked why he entered her room without permission. Kai replied that Mito and the others were currently fighting on the front lines, and for them to win they would need her power, her manipulation of water. That's why he was looking for her. Yumi was surprised and said that she was not in the combat squad. Kai told her not to worry. She had the guts to be a fighter. Let him join Mito and help them. Yumi asked him what made him think she would join. Kai replied that she could fight. Leonora had instilled fear in her, and nothing limits her anymore. And enough time has passed for her mental wounds to heal. And now is not the time to play the awkward waitress who smashes plates. Yumi was surprised and asked him if he saw that. Kai asked her if she didn't want to help Nagase and Shinami. Yumi told him that he always knows what to say. And of course it's amazing. But she doesn't think he cares about his classmates that much. Kai replied that he just doesn't want to lose the figure he can use. Yumi asked him if he wasn't wanted. Did he want to join the fighting squad too? Kai replied that they were still looking for him. Therefore, he had no chance to join the army of the sacred country. Yumi said that was true, and even Rina would not allow him to do so. Kai put on his mask and said that he would act from the shadows. And moving the figures to the right place is part of his job. At this moment, Yumi remembered all his words and told herself that she would try hard. And if her power could really be useful. Rin was behind a tree at that moment, listening to their words. Earlier, Kai asked her if she had any questions. Rin told him that she understood why he needed Kinoshita. They could take advantage of the enemy's weakness, but would it really work? Kai replied that he had not fought him himself, but believed that they could come up with an effective way to counter him. And before they act, let them think it over. He wants to see how much they've grown while he's been gone. And let him tell Mito that. Rina listened to everything carefully and replied that she would pass it on. Mito suddenly turned to her and said that they needed to go through the plan, and this time they definitely won't lose. Rin agreed with him and they began to discuss their plan. At that moment in the forest, Maya asked if everything would be okay. If he were in their place, of course, he would have come up with a better strategy. Kai replied that if he told them what to do, they would never become independent. Now his goal was to kill the Demon King and he needed them for that anyway. They have power, but they have poor control over it. And he will also help them and give them hints. But the most important thing is how they will act in battle. And there they will have to think for themselves. The monsters were already prepared for the attack of their enemies and looked around the territories so as not to miss anything. Suddenly, Amelia stood in front of the castle with her army and said that they were just in time and immediately ordered the soldiers to attack. Having started the attack, the monsters said that they were back again. And in vain they let them retreat last time. Amelia shouted at them not to be afraid. They had to clear the way for the hero candidates, and the monsters were also ready and the chief said that they should kill all the people. Mito immediately began to fall through the monsters, killing each one. But suddenly he stopped and saw in the window the shadow of the enemy he needed. Stongai showed his face and his smile because he understood that they definitely couldn't defeat him. Mito thought he was already waiting for them. Stongai came out of the shadows and said that the hero candidates had arrived. And this time he would not let them go. But the guys did not retreat, but on the contrary they came to his face and destroyed the main doors to his room. But Stongai was already prepared and awaiting their arrival. And he even decided to perform in honor of his homeland. But Mito ordered his men to act according to the plan. At this moment, Kai was also in the room sitting under cover. Kai listened to their words and said that for now they have everything. All that remains is to wait and see. Mito activated his sword and gave the order to his guys, saying that they were acting according to plan. During the attack, Rina asked the girl if she was okay. Yumi answered that she was, and she could rely on her. Yumi immediately used a water manipulation attack and sent a large stream of water at the golems. Stongai was a little surprised when he saw the water and didn't expect that this time they would have a person with a water attack. After directing a stream of water at the goal, Arashur also used his stream of fire under the impact of the explosion. Mito also did not stand aside and fought with the creatures, because he needed to get to the main one. Arasu's guys caught one of the goals together and began to destroy it from different sides. The whole team was united and confident this time because this time they were very well prepared. But Yumi's water was so necessary this time that it destroyed all the creatures at once. But the creatures began to gather again in small pieces, but the density of the water was higher, which eventually led to their dissolution. Rina was also happy and said that it was great. Stongai was a little surprised by the water technique and said that it was not there last time. And is she really a newbie? Kai watched the battle and told the girl that everything happened just as she had read. But Maya replied that if the rock connecting the golem stones were wetted, it would make them harder to control. The effect was even better than she expected. Mito told his men to watch carefully, because wet golems do not regenerate, and he ordered them to beat them. Yumi immediately heard the order and activated the water flow again, and used a large wave on them. The rest of the students immediately ran after her attack to attack and finish them off once and for all. Standing in front of the large and huge creatures, they felt no fear and were ready to fight them to the death. Stongai noticed that they wanted to destroy his golems first. They had a great strategist this time. But that was not all. Stongai placed his hand on the ground and activated his seal again. But suddenly strange creatures began to appear from the ground and he realized that the golems were just soldiers. And having united all parts of the creature into a single whole, he said that this is the real power of the earth. But Stongai did not stop there and sent the strange stones straight at the students. But she stood up for the student and activated her telekinesis and stopped all the stones with her power. Stongai was surprised and asked how this happened, and he realized that she had broken his control over the land. Rin also entered the battle and activated her control ability, and she directed it straight at Stongai, but the king tried to resist and realized that this was submission. Arashur, seeing this, did not want to let him go just like that and immediately went to attack with his explosion. But Stongai noticed this and used a mud wall to reflect his attack, and easily reflected the guy's attack. Stongai started laughing and told the guy that he couldn't break through his defense. But Mito immediately activated the distance reduction, and ended up behind the enemy. Mito did not waste his time and immediately attacked. But Stongai immediately felt his strength and grabbed his blade and said that he could not be stopped by such a thing. Mirai saw this and activated her telekinesis abilities and used her stones to attack. Stongai sensed this and realized that the stolen stones were returning. And Ria also entered the battle and activated wind manipulation. Directing wind manipulation at the enemy, he used his wind spears. All the warriors attacked one Stongai from different sides and tried to catch him off guard. Stongai immediately noticed that they had tried hard, but it was still not enough to break through his defense, and immediately used the stone wall attack expansion. The guys were shocked and did not expect this. Yumi decided to step up as well and ordered a stream of water to gather in one of her hands and attacked his defense with the stream of water. Stongai saw from the other side that his defense was slowly being destroyed, and he knew that this was bad, and he even knew that the wet ground was losing its firmness. Mito, seeing this, shouted that this was the end. Arashir also shouted for him to die, and was ready to use his fire blast attack. With a single stream of attacks, they easily destroyed his defense and even hit Stongai with their attacks. Stongai understood that it was bearable for now, but sooner or later they would achieve their goal, and now he is only all or nothing left. And all the magic that he used for defense he will now put into the attack. Starting his upgrade into another being that was even stronger than the previous one, Kai used his moment and attacked him with his knife right in the head. Stongai didn't even expect such a turn of events, that he would say goodbye to his life just like this. The guys, seeing that he was dead, began to rejoice and shout that they had succeeded. Mito and Arashir had defeated Stongai. The guys approached the enemy's body and Mito saw the knife and understood that everything was wrong. Arashir looked at the whole body and seeing a dagger on the ground, he picked it up and couldn't believe it. Mito also looked around and saw that there was a crack in the ceiling and it was very suspiciously standing in the same place from where the attack was planned. Mito asked out loud, was it really Kai? Arashir was also very angry at him because he hated him. One of the students came up and said that their plan worked. Mito pretended that everything was so and answered that everything was correct. Mito knew that everything was going according to plan, and thanks to Kinoshita, they had gained an advantage in the fight. But at the last moment, he felt a huge amount of magic coming from Stongai, and they certainly wouldn't have been able to handle him themselves. And that's why Kai intervened in the battle with his dagger. Mirai approached him and asked why he was sad. She couldn't understand. Isn't now the time to be happy? Mito tried to tell her what was going on, but Mirai said that he would tell her everything later and left. After all, they had defeated one of the 4 heavenly kings. Mirai immediately pushed him into the circle and shouted that everything was fine now. But Mito did not want to rejoice and shouted for her to stop, but it was too late. The students shouted in the circle that Mito was a great guy, and he was a wonderful commander. At the moment, Mito was confused, and after thinking about it, he was happy because all the students consider him the team leader. But Arashir still couldn't get over what he had seen and was deep in thought. But his guys came up to him and said that he was a good guy, and he had beaten their enemy in no time, and they would follow him to the ends of the earth. But Arashir told them to shut their mouths and said that it was definitely not him who killed him. The guys were confused at the moment and asked him for forgiveness. But one of the guys said that he understood why he was so upset. Arashir asked him if he saw it too. The guy replied that he was there, and he shouldn't worry about it so much. And that was just the final blow. The one who cornered one of the 4 heavenly kings was him, and that's a fact. After all this, Mito stood in Stongai's place and shouted to all the warriors, raising his head and saying that the king of the earth was defeated, and let all the monsters and warriors lay down their weapons. The monsters, seeing the head of Mr. Stongai, were shocked and realized that they had all lost. Isabel also heard his words and raised her sword into the sky and shouted that they had won. Hector was also shocked and said that they did it. At that moment, Kai and Maya were in the buildings, and looking at all this, he said that everything was over. Maya replied that the demons were more numerous, weren't they? Kai replied that the Demon King's army was driven forward by the charisma of their leader. But the leader is dead and they won't resist anymore. Mai also remembered and said that after Wimberg's death, they weren't even sent out to pursue them. Kai replied that this was one of the weak points of the Demon King's army. Maya asked if he was okay with it. The guy was surprised and asked what exactly. Maya replied that he killed Stongai. Wasn't he going to train those guys? Kai replied that at that moment he felt a strong thirst for blood from Stongai. They must not die before he had time to train them, and his main profession is a killer. He wanted them to know that. Maya told him that he cared about them surprisingly much. Kai replied that he had been thinking about it for a long time. And how long was she going to call him by something other than his name? After all, his name was Kai, and he had introduced himself earlier. Maya replied that she didn't know how best to address him. So could she call him Kai? The guy answered that he agreed. And turning around, he asked her why her face was red. Maya began to cover herself and said that it wasn't red, and let her not pay attention. Kai thought and understood that 2 of the 4 kings remained. But there are still direct descendants of the Demon King, and he doesn't even know how strong they are. And there's still a long way to go before he becomes the Demon King. Suddenly, a situation occurred in the cave in which the monster said that it took a lot of effort. And through the princess's body at his feet, the creature saw that the princess had woken up and began to get very angry at everything that was happening. The guy said that she still hadn't lost heart, and she couldn't even move. But suddenly the demon came and the guy told him to tell everything. The demon said that the princess was captured, and now the Beastmen Alliance is under their control.